My wife was secretly planning to be a sugar baby behind my back and using my money to do so. Now she is facing the consequences. It started with a misplaced receipt. Not even misplaced really, just oddly placed. Alea, my wife, usually leaves receipts scattered around like confetti after a parade. Kitchen counter, bedside table, even tucked into the couch cushions, they were everywhere. But this one, a crisp, pristine receipt from a high-end lingerie store, was deliberately tucked into my laptop bag, right alongside my charger. I found it on a Tuesday morning, rushing to get out the door for a client meeting. At first, I didn't even register it. Just pulled it out, glanced at the store name, Serafina's Silk, and tossed it onto the kitchen island, thinking it was another one for the pile. But something niggled at me. Serafina's Silk wasn't Alea's usual style. She's more of a Target lingerie kind of woman, comfortable and practical. Serafina's was luxury, extravagant, the kind of place you'd go for a special occasion or if you were trying to impress someone. Later that day, during a lull in my afternoon, I fished the receipt out of the pile. The total was eye-watering. $350 for, well, let's just say it wasn't your everyday underwear. It was the kind of thing a woman might buy if she was, say, trying to look particularly alluring for someone. A chill went down my spine. Alea hadn't been herself lately, distant, distracted. She'd been spending more and more time on her phone, always giggling and whispering, turning the screen away if I came near. I'd chalked it up to stress at work, or maybe reconnecting with old friends online. Now, this receipt, coupled with her recent behavior, painted a different picture. A picture I didn't like at all. We've been married for 7 years. Felix and Alea, high school sweethearts practically. We built our life together from the ground up. I'm a financial advisor, meticulous and organized, good with numbers. Alea is creative, free-spirited. She runs a small online boutique selling handcrafted jewelry. Opposites attract, right? It worked for us for a long time. I handled the finances, the investments, the bills, everything. Alea, bless her heart, is wonderfully talented but not exactly financially savvy. It was always easier this way. She focused on her art, I focused on keeping us afloat and building our future. That night, I couldn't sleep. The receipt burned a hole in my mind. I went through our bank statements online, something I do regularly to keep track of everything, and that's when I saw it. Recurring withdrawals, every week, small amounts at first, then larger, all categorized as online services. The names were unfamiliar, coded. I dug deeper, Googled a few of them. Dating websites, specifically dating websites geared towards, well, let's just say arrangements. Sugar daddy sites. My blood ran cold. Sugar daddy sites? Alea. My Alea, it was ludicrous. And yet the receipt, the hidden withdrawals, her secretive phone habits, it all pointed in one horrifying direction. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it. Was I wrong? Was I jumping to conclusions? Maybe these were just mistakes. But deep down, a cold knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. The next day, I decided I needed proof. I know it sounds terrible, snooping on your wife, but I felt like my world was crumbling, and I needed to know the truth, one way or another. I waited until Alea was out at her pottery class, something she'd started a few months ago, another new hobby. I went to her laptop, the one she used for her business, the one I'd helped her set up and secure, and there it was. A browser history filled with sugar daddy websites, profiles on those sites, and messages with men, older men, wealthy men, men promising arrangements, financial support, gifts. In exchange for companionship, I felt sick. The messages were explicit, vulgar, and they were from Alea. My wife, the woman I'd loved since we were kids, was actively seeking to become a sugar baby behind my back. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just the cheating, the deception. It was the sheer audacity of it. She was planning to sell herself to someone else for money while I was working my ass off to provide for us, to build a life for us. And she was doing it with our asterisk money. Because those withdrawals, those lingerie purchases, they were all coming from our joint account, the account I managed, the account I thought we were building together. Rage surged through me, hot and furious. But beneath the anger, there was a deeper, colder feeling: disappointment. Sadness. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd vowed to spend my life with, was a stranger, and that stranger was planning to destroy everything we had built. That's when I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. If Alea wanted to play games, if she wanted to live a double life, then fine. But she was going to learn that actions have consequences, and she was going to learn what it felt like to be truly alone, truly responsible for her own choices. I spent the rest of the day meticulously transferring every single penny out of our joint accounts. Savings, investments, everything. I moved it all into accounts solely in my name. It was a considerable sum, years of careful saving and planning. The house, thankfully, was in my name, a premarital asset. The cars, too, I made sure everything was secure, airtight. That evening, Alea came home, bright and cheerful, humming a tune. She walked into the kitchen, kissed me on the cheek, and started rummaging in the fridge. "What's for dinner, honey?" she asked, her voice light and carefree. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but a cold, detached emptiness. "There isn't any dinner, Alea," I said, my voice flat. "And there won't be, not here, not anymore." She turned, her smile faltering. "What are you talking about, Felix?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I know," I said, my voice still calm, but laced with steel. "I know about the sugar daddy sites, I know about the lingerie. I know about everything." Her face paled, the cheerful facade crumbling instantly. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fear. "I've transferred all the money," I continued, letting the words hang in the air. "Every account, every penny, it's all gone, into accounts you don't have access to." Her breath hitched. You what? You wanted to be a sugar baby, Alea?" I said, the question laced with bitter sarcasm. "Fine, be a sugar baby, but you're going to do it on your own dime, because you're not getting another cent of mine." Her voice rose, hysteria creeping in. "Felix, you can't do that. That's our money, our future." "Our future?" I echoed, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "There is no our future, Alea. Not anymore, you made sure of that." But why?" she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? Why am I doing this?" I repeated, incredulous. "Alea, you were planning to cheat on me, to sell yourself for money, and you're asking me why I'm upset, why I'm taking action." It wasn't going to be like that," she protested weakly. "It was just an idea. I was just exploring." "Exploring?" I scoffed. "Exploring with my money. Exploring with our marriage. No, Alea, you were planning to betray me, and I'm not going to stand for it." "But the debt," she cried, her voice cracking. "Felix, you know about the debt. I needed help." "Debt? Ah, yes, the debt." Another little secret Alea had been keeping from me. A mountain of credit card debt, racked up over the past year, hidden from my meticulous financial oversight. I discovered that too, buried in the fine print of her credit reports when I was reviewing our finances. It was substantial, tens of thousands of dollars, spent on who knows what. More lingerie, pottery classes, sugar baby starter kits. "Debt," I said, my voice cold. "Yes, Alea, I know about the debt. The debt you hid from me, the debt you racked up while planning to cheat on me. Well, guess what? The debt is all yours now, because I'm done. I'm done with the lies, the secrets, the betrayal. I'm done with you." I stood up, walked to the door, and grabbed my coat. "I'm leaving," I said, not looking back. "I'm going to stay at a hotel. Don't expect me back." I walked out, leaving Alea standing there, alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of our marriage, the wreckage she had so carelessly created. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was over. It was painful, yes, but it was also clean. I was free. And Alea, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was about to learn a very harsh lesson about consequences. Update 1 The hotel room was sterile, impersonal, but it was quiet. And that's all I really needed. Quiet. Away from Alea's tears, her protests, her desperate attempts to explain, to minimize, to manipulate. She'd been calling and texting non-stop since I left, a barrage of apologies, justifications, and accusations. I ignored them all. I needed space, time to process, time to breathe without the suffocating weight of her betrayal. The next morning, I met with a divorce lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who listened intently to my story, her expression hardening with each detail. She assured me I was within my rights to protect my assets, that Alea's actions were grounds for a straightforward divorce. She advised me to document everything, to keep all communication in writing, and to avoid any direct contact with Alea if possible. Armed with legal advice and a growing sense of resolve, I returned to the house, not to reconcile, but to collect my things. Alea was there, of course, waiting for me, her eyes red and puffy, her face streaked with mascara. She looked pathetic, and I felt nothing, just a weary indifference. "Felix, please," she pleaded, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk. We can fix this. I made a mistake, a stupid mistake, but it doesn't mean we have to throw everything away." "Mistake," I repeated, my voice flat. "Alea, planning to become a sugar baby, lying to my face, hiding debt, that's not a mistake. That's a deliberate choice. a series of deliberate choices. But I didn't go through with it, she cried. I didn't actually cheat, it was just talk. Fantasies funded by my money, Alea, I pointed out coldly. Fantasies built on a foundation of lies, and frankly, I don't care if you went through with it or not. The intent was there, the betrayal was there, and that's enough for me. But what about us? She wailed, tears streaming down her face. What about our vows, for better or for worse? Remember, this is worse, Felix. This is when you're supposed to stand by me. For better or for worse doesn't mean for betrayal and deception, I retorted, my voice hardening. It doesn't mean for lies and secret sugar daddy profiles. You broke our vows, Alea, not me. I started packing, methodically filling boxes with my clothes, my books, my personal belongings. She hovered around me, a wounded animal, begging, pleading, trying to guilt-trip me, to manipulate me. But I was immune to her tactics now. The betrayal had cauterized my emotions, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. The debt, Felix, she said, her voice desperate. What am I going to do about the debt? You know I can't afford to pay it on my own. I'll be ruined. That's not my problem anymore, Alea, I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. You made your choices, now you have to live with the consequences, just like I am. But it's not fair, she screamed, her voice rising to a shriek. You're being so unfair. After everything we've been through, after all these years. Fair, I said, finally turning to face her, my eyes locking with hers. You want to talk about fair, Alea? Is it fair that you were planning to sell yourself for money behind my back? Is it fair that you lied to me, betrayed me, destroyed our marriage? Don't talk to me about fair, Alea. You forfeited your right to talk about fair the moment you created that sugar baby profile. I turned back to my packing, ignoring her sobs, her pleas, her increasingly frantic accusations. I was done. Completely, irrevocably done. Let her face the music. Let her deal with the debt, with the consequences of her choices. I was moving on, to a life without lies, without betrayal, without Alea. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, logistical arrangements, and emotional detachment. My lawyer was a godsend, guiding me through the divorce process, handling all communication with Alea's increasingly erratic lawyer. Alea herself was a mess, a whirlwind of anger, grief, and desperation. She tried everything to get me back: tearful phone calls, pleading emails, even showing up at my office unannounced, begging me to reconsider. I remained firm, unwavering. The trust was broken beyond repair. There was no going back. The divorce was finalized surprisingly quickly. Alea, facing the reality of her financial ruin, eventually agreed to a settlement that left me with everything I'd transferred and saddled her with the debt she'd accumulated. It wasn't vindictive, it was just fair. She made her bed, now she had to lie in it. Update 2 **. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. 6 months since I walked out on Alea and our life together. People ask me if I'm happy now. Happy isn't exactly the word I'd use. Relieved, maybe. Resolved, definitely. Free. The anger has faded, replaced by a kind of quiet resignation. I don't hate Alea. I don't even feel much of anything for her anymore, except maybe a faint pity. She's struggling, I hear through mutual acquaintances. Her boutique is barely breaking even, the debt is a constant weight around her neck, and the sugar daddy fantasy never materialized into anything real. She's alone, adrift, facing the consequences of her impulsive and frankly foolish choices. Some people, mostly Alea's friends, try to paint me as the villain in this story. Cold, they call me, heartless, unforgiving. They say I should have been more understanding, more compassionate, that Alea was just going through a phase, that she didn't really mean to hurt me. They say I should have given her a second chance, that love conquers all. But love isn't a magic wand, folks. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card for betrayal and deception. Love requires trust, honesty, respect, and Alea shattered all of that. She chose to lie, to scheme, to prioritize a fleeting fantasy over the solid, real relationship we had built together. And for that, she had to pay the price. I don't regret my actions, not for a single moment. I did what I had to do to protect myself, to protect my future, to protect my sanity. I walked away from a toxic situation, from a woman who was willing to throw away everything we had for a shallow, selfish whim. And in doing so, I saved myself. I'm not looking for a pat on the back or validation from strangers on the internet. I just wanted to share my story, to put it out there, to maybe help someone else who might be facing a similar situation. Don't be a doormat. Don't let yourself be manipulated or betrayed. Stand up for yourself, protect yourself, and remember, actions have consequences for everyone, even sugar babies who forget who manages the accounts. As for Alea, I wish her no ill will. I hope she learns from this, grows from this, and maybe someday finds her way to a healthier, more honest path. But that's her journey now. Mine is moving forward, away from the wreckage, towards a future I can build on my own terms, a future free from lies and betrayal. And for that, I am truly grateful.
My in-laws tried to take over my kids' lives, so I bought them a one-way ticket home. Now my husband is furious, and my father-in-law says I'm just like my mother. My in-laws moved in temporarily and tried to take over raising my kids, so I bought them a one-way ticket back home. Okay, Reddit, I need to vent and maybe get some perspective because I'm starting to feel like I'm losing my mind. My in-laws, Kai and Megan, are lovely people, in theory. Before they moved in, they were the grandparents who visited a few times a year, brought thoughtful gifts, and then went back home. Blissful grandparenting. Then, disaster struck, or so they said. Apparently, a pipe burst in their house back in February. Major flooding, extensive damage, the whole 9 yards. My husband, bless his kind heart, immediately offered for them to come stay with us temporarily while their house was being repaired. Temporarily. Famous last words, right? It's now almost June. 4 months. 4 months of temporary. And in those 4 months, my house has become less my home and more some kind of weird grandparent boot camp. It started subtly. Little comments here and there. Are you sure, Amelia, that's enough layers for little Leo? He looks a bit chilly. Leo is 8 and perfectly capable of telling me if he's cold, Kai. Or, Megan, do you think maybe Clara should have a bit more vegetables with her dinner? She's growing so fast, needs her greens. Clara is 5 and currently in a phase where she'd rather eat air than broccoli, but thanks for the input, Megan. At first, I tried to be polite, laugh it off. Oh, you know how grandparents are, always worried? But it didn't stop. It escalated. It's like they saw the inside of our house as some kind of invitation to rewrite our entire parenting manual. Suddenly, bedtimes were being questioned, screen time was a constant topic of conversation, and don't even get me started on the food. Megan has apparently decided that everything I feed my kids is processed and full of sugar. Never mind that I cook from scratch most nights and limit sugary treats. She started buying healthier alternatives, which is lovely, except she doesn't ask. She just replaces things in the pantry. I came home from work last week to find my kids eating some kind of organic, sugar-free, gluten-free, cardboard-tasting granola that Megan had deemed much better than their usual Cheerios. Leo actually spat it out. Clara just looked at me with these big, betrayed eyes. My kids are not picky eaters. They eat pretty much everything I put in front of them. Until now. And it's not just the food, it's everything. Discipline. Forget it. If I try to implement any kind of consequence for bad behavior, Kai and Megan swoop in like the grandparent cavalry. Oh, now Amelia, don't be too harsh on him. He's just being a boy. Or, sweetheart, it's okay, Grandma and Grandpa understand. Mommy's just a little stressed. Thanks, guys. Really undermining my parental authority there. It's gotten to the point where my kids are starting to play them off against me. Clara threw a tantrum in the supermarket yesterday because I wouldn't buy her a giant inflatable unicorn pool float. She started screaming, but Grandma Megan said she'd get it for me if Mommy didn't. Seriously. I had to put back half my groceries and drag a screaming 5-year-old out of the store. It was mortifying. And my husband, Cade, he's useless. He loves his parents, I get it. He's grateful they're here. He's worried about their house. He's trying to be supportive. But he's also completely checked out of the parenting aspect of this whole in-law invasion. Just let them help, Amelia. They're just trying to be helpful. Helpful. They're turning my kids into spoiled brats and making me feel like I'm living in someone else's house. I've tried talking to them. Politely. Kai, Megan, I really appreciate you being here, but I think maybe we have different approaches to parenting. Could we maybe try to stick to our routines while you're here? Polite, right? Wrong. It was like I'd insulted their entire family lineage. Kai puffed up his chest and started talking about how they raised Cade just fine and he turned out perfectly respectable. Megan chimed in about how times have changed, and children need more guidance these days. Guidance, or constant, suffocating, unsolicited advice? I'm at my wit's end. I love my kids. I love my husband even when he's being spineless. But I cannot live like this anymore. I need my house back. I need my parenting back. I need my sanity back. Reddit, am I being unreasonable? Is it wrong of me to want my in-laws to? I don't know. Maybe go back to their temporarily damaged house, even if it's still technically under repair. Because frankly, I'm about to lose it. Update 1, okay, so after my last post, I had a mini meltdown. Wine was involved. Chocolate was consumed, and I spent a good hour just staring at the ceiling wondering how I got here. Then I read through the comments on my last post. Thank you, Reddit, seriously. You guys validated me in a way my own husband hasn't managed to in weeks. So many of you said I wasn't overreacting, that my feelings were completely understandable, that in-laws taking over parenting is a classic, terrible situation. It helped. It really did. Armed with a renewed sense of righteous anger and a slight wine hangover, I decided to try a different approach. Politeness hadn't worked. Subtlety was a joke. Maybe it was time for some directness. The next morning, Kai was in the kitchen making breakfast. Again, he's taken over breakfast duty completely. Which on the surface sounds nice, right? Except he makes these elaborate, time-consuming breakfasts that involve way too much butter and sugar, and then he gets all huffy if the kids don't eat every last bite. This morning it was pancakes. Giant, fluffy, dripping with syrup pancakes. Leo, bless his heart, was trying to politely choke one down. Clara was pushing hers around her plate with a face like thunder. "Good morning, Kai," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Morning, Emilia. Just making sure these little ones start their day with a good, hearty breakfast." He beamed, clearly pleased with himself. "That's thoughtful," I said, forcing a smile. "But actually, I usually handle breakfast. The kids are used to cereal and fruit. It's quicker and healthier." Kai's smile faltered. But Megan and I thought, pancakes are a treat for the grandchildren. "They are a treat," I agreed, still trying to be calm. "But we don't have treats every day. And honestly, Kai, I'd prefer it if you and Megan didn't take over meal prep without asking me first. I have a system and it works for us." His face went red. "System? Emilia, they're children, not machines. You need to indulge them a little. Spoil them. That's what grandparents are for." "Grandparents are for visiting and spoiling occasionally," I corrected, my voice getting a little sharper. "Not for moving in and rewriting my entire life. And frankly, Kai, I'm not asking for your opinion on my parenting. I'm telling you to back off." Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Leo and Clara were staring at us wide-eyed. Megan chose that exact moment to wander into the kitchen. "What's all the commotion?" she asked, looking from Kai's thunderous face to mine. Kai spluttered something about me being ungrateful and unappreciative. Megan, ever the peacemaker, tried to smooth things over. Now, Kai, let's not get upset. Emilia, dear, we just want to help. You look so tired all the time." "I'm tired because I feel like I'm constantly fighting for control of my own life in my own home," I snapped, finally losing my cool. "With all due respect, Megan, your help is making things worse. You're undermining my authority with my kids, you're changing our routines, you're making me feel like I'm doing everything wrong. And frankly, I'm done." I took a deep breath, trying to regain some composure. "I appreciate you and Kai being here after the water damage. But temporary is starting to feel very permanent, and it's not working for us. It's not working for me." Megan's face crumpled. "Are you saying you want us to leave?" "I'm saying," I clarified, trying to soften my tone slightly, "that maybe it's time to start thinking about when you'll be able to go back home. Even if it's not fully repaired yet, maybe a smaller place for now, or, I don't know. But this isn't sustainable." Megan started to cry. Kai looked like he was about to explode. Leo and Clara started whimpering. It was a disaster. Cade, of course, was nowhere to be seen. He'd conveniently disappeared to take a work call the moment things started to get heated. Great. So now I'm the bad guy. The ungrateful daughter-in-law who's kicking out her poor, displaced in-laws. But honestly, I don't care anymore. I'm done being polite. I'm done being subtle. I'm done feeling like a stranger in my own house. I need my life back. And if that makes me a jerk, then so be it. I'd rather be a jerk in my own peaceful, plant-filled, granola-free home than a saint in this grandparent-induced chaos. Still haven't told Cade the full extent of my conversation with his parents. I'm bracing myself for the fallout. Wish me luck, Reddit. I think I'm going to need it. Update 2. Well, Reddit, buckle up because things escalated. Fast after my frank conversation with Kai and Megan, things were tense to say the least. Megan retreated to the spare bedroom and stayed there for most of the day, emerging only for meals, which she ate in stony silence. Kai, on the other hand, was a simmering volcano of passive aggression. He slammed doors, sighed loudly, and made pointed comments about ungrateful children and families falling apart. Charming. Cade, predictably, tried to play peacemaker. "Emilia, honey, maybe you were a little harsh. They're just going through a lot, you know." "Cade," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "They've been here for 4 months. 4 months of constant interference and undermining. I've been more than patient. I've tried to be polite. It's not working. I need them to leave." "But where would they go?" he wailed, sounding genuinely distressed. "Their house isn't ready yet. Then they can find a rental apartment," I said, my patience finally snapping. They're adults, Cade, they can figure it out. Just like we figured it out when we needed a place to live. He looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Deadly serious, I confirmed. And then, I did something impulsive, something maybe a little bit petty. But honestly, Reddit, I was running on fumes. I went online and booked 2 one-way tickets, not to some exotic vacation destination, not to a relaxing spa retreat, but to their hometown. Their hometown, which is a good 12-hour drive away. For the following week. The following week, as in, next week. I printed out the e-tickets, folded them neatly, and waited for Cade to come home from work. When he walked in the door, looking tired and stressed, I handed them to him. "What's this?" he asked, looking confused. "Your parents' tickets home," I said, trying to sound casual. "I booked them flights for next Tuesday." He stared at the tickets, then at me, then back at the tickets. "Flights, but their house isn't ready." "I know," I said, "but maybe they can stay with your sister for a while, or find a short-term rental. I'm sure they'll figure something out." He was speechless, absolutely, utterly speechless. He just stood there, holding the tickets, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Finally, he managed to stammer, "Emilia, you can't be serious. You bought them plane tickets." "One way," I emphasized, trying to keep a straight face. "One-way tickets back home. They're leaving next Tuesday." And then, the dam broke. He exploded. "Are you crazy?" he roared, his face turning a shade of purple I didn't know existed. "You can't just kick out my parents, they have nowhere else to go." "They have their hometown," I pointed out calmly. "They have friends, family, connections. They'll be fine. And frankly, Cade, I'm done discussing this. They're leaving next Tuesday. That's final." He ranted, he raved, he called me names I won't repeat here. He accused me of being heartless, cruel, and a terrible daughter-in-law. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Good riddance, I thought, letting out a long, shaky breath. I felt a little guilty, maybe, a little bit mean. But mostly, I felt relief, pure, unadulterated relief. Later that evening, Kai and Megan emerged from their self-imposed exile. Kai looked like he wanted to murder me. Megan looked like she'd been crying for hours. "Emilia," Kai said, his voice dangerously low, "Cade told us what you did." "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I bought you plane tickets home." "How dare you?" he bellowed. "How dare you treat us like this after everything we've done for you, for this family?" "Everything you've done," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Kai, you've been here for 4 months, undermining my parenting, making me feel unwelcome in my own home, and turning my kids into spoiled brats. With all due respect, I think it's time for you to go." Megan burst into fresh tears. But we thought we were helping," she wailed. "You weren't," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "You were making things worse, and I need my house back, I need my life back. And frankly, Megan, Kai, I don't think you're going to get your house fixed in 4 days, so maybe it's time to face reality and find a new temporary solution, somewhere else." They stared at me, shocked and hurt. Then, Kai did something completely unexpected. He started to laugh. A harsh, bitter, humorless laugh. "You know what, Emilia?" he said, shaking his head. "You're just like your mother, always had to have things your way, always had to be in control." My blood ran cold. He hadn't mentioned my mother in years, and his tone, it was venomous. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He just smirked. "Oh, just saying, like mother, like daughter, I guess." And with that, he and Megan turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, frozen, a chill running down my spine. I don't know what that comment meant. I don't know why he said it. And frankly, I don't want to know. But one thing is for sure. Next Tuesday can't come soon enough. And maybe, just maybe, after they're gone, my house will finally feel like home again. I'll update again after the departure. If I survive until then. My in-laws are trying to erase my grandmother by not accepting my daughter's name. After we legally registered it, they are now giving us the cold shoulder. My husband Liam and I welcomed our daughter into the world last month. We named her Ava, a name that was very special to me. It was my grandmother's name, and she was the most incredible woman I've ever known. We went back and forth on names for ages, and when we landed on Ava, it just felt right. Liam loved it too, and we were both so happy with our choice. Then we told Liam's parents, Justin and Kaitlyn, and that's when the trouble started. They didn't just dislike the name, they seemed actively offended by it. At first, it was subtle. "Ava, huh, that's different," Justin said with this tight little smile that didn't reach his eyes. Kaitlyn chimed in, "Are you sure you've considered all the family names? We have such lovely names that have been passed down for generations." We had, of course, considered family names. Liam's family has a long history of incredibly traditional, frankly, quite boring names. There's a Richard, a Robert, A William in every generation, it feels like. Nice names, sure, but not what we wanted for our daughter. We explained that we loved Ava, that it felt meaningful to us, and that was that. Or so we thought. It has been anything but that ever since. Every time we see them, the name comes up. It's like they can't let it go. They'll casually drop suggestions. Have you thought about Catherine? It's very similar to Caitlin, and it's a classic. Or, we were just looking through the family tree, and did you know there was an Alina way back when? Such a strong, beautiful name. It's relentless, and it's starting to wear us down. It's not just the suggestions, it's the way they say Ava. They say it like it's a bad word, like it tastes bad in their mouths. They'll often just avoid using her name altogether, referring to her as the baby or your daughter, even when they're talking directly to her. It's so disrespectful, and frankly, it's hurtful. We picked this name because we love it, because it means something to us, and because it's our asterisk baby. It's our decision, not theirs. Liam has tried to talk to them to gently push back. He said things like, "Mom, Dad, we've chosen Ava, we really love it, can we please just move on?" But it's like talking to a brick wall. They just nod and smile politely, and then 5 minutes later, Caitlin will be saying, "You know, Amelia is also a lovely a name, very elegant." It's driving me insane. I love Liam's parents, I really do. They've always been good to me, welcoming me into their family with open arms. But this is crossing a line. It feels like they're trying to erase my grandmother, to invalidate my connection to her, by dismissing her name. And it's not just about the name anymore, it's about control. It feels like they want to control this aspect of our lives, of our daughter's life, and we're just not going to let that happen. I know it sounds dramatic, but it's really starting to feel like a power struggle. And honestly, it's making me resent them, which is the last thing I want. I want them to have a good relationship with Ava, their granddaughter, but their constant negativity about her name is poisoning everything. I'm starting to dread seeing them, and that makes me really sad. I just wish they could accept our decision and be happy for us, be happy about their new granddaughter, regardless of what we named her. It's Ava. Her name is Ava, and that's not changing. Update 1: the pressure hasn't let up, if anything, it's gotten worse. Justin and Caitlin are visiting more frequently now, just to see the baby, of course. But every visit turns into another round of name suggestions and thinly veiled criticisms. They come over armed with lists of beautiful, traditional names, printed out from baby name websites, highlighted and annotated with little notes about family history and suitability. It's suffocating. Last Sunday, they came over for lunch, and within 10 minutes of arriving, Caitlin was holding Ava and saying, "Oh, she's just such a precious little thing, a proper little Eliner." She didn't even finish the sentence with Ava's name. It was like she was trying to will it into existence, to manifest Eliner into being by sheer force of suggestion. Liam and I exchanged a look. We've developed a whole nonverbal communication system around this name issue. A raised eyebrow, a slight head shake, a barely perceptible sigh. It's how we cope. We try to deflect, to change the subject, but they're persistent. Justin will corner Liam in the kitchen, just chatting, but then it always veers into name territory. "Liam, son, you're a sensible man. You must see that Ava is just trendy. It'll date her. Something classic, like a family name, is timeless." And Caitlin, oh, Caitlin is the master of passive-aggressive comments. She'll say things like, "When I introduce her to my friends, what should I say? This is Ava." It just doesn't have a ring to it, does it? Or, "I was filling out a baby announcement card and I almost put Abigail by mistake. See, even I'm confused by the name." It's exhausting. We're both running on fumes. It's supposed to be this joyous time, this period of new parent bliss, but it's constantly overshadowed by this ridiculous name debate. We've tried being polite, we've tried being firm, we've even tried being a little bit blunt. Nothing seems to work. They just keep chipping away, relentless in their campaign to rename our daughter. Last night, after another particularly draining visit, Liam and I had a serious talk. We were both at our wits' end. "Veronica," Liam said, rubbing his temples, "I don't know what to do. I've tried talking to them, but they just don't listen. It's like they're convinced they know better than us." "I know, honey," I said, feeling equally frustrated. "It's like they think it's their baby, not ours." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us feeling defeated. Then, an idea sparked in my mind. It wasn't a grand, dramatic plan, but it was something, a way to maybe, just maybe, finally put an end to this. "Liam," I said slowly, "what if we legally registered her name?" He looked at me, a question mark etched on his face. "You mean, like officially?" "Yeah," I said. "Like get her birth certificate sorted, name officially recorded, everything done and dusted. Maybe if it's actually legally official, they'll finally get the message." Liam considered it, his brow furrowed in thought. It's a bit drastic, isn't it? Maybe, I conceded. But what else can we do? We've tried everything else. Maybe seeing it in black and white, seeing that it's not just a whim or a phase but her actual legal name, will finally make them stop. He sighed, then nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, let's do it. Let's make it official. Let's make it Ava legally, undeniably, Ava. So this morning we did it. We went online, filled out the forms, paid the fees, and officially registered Ava's name. It's done. Ava is legally Ava. It's a small act of defiance, maybe, but it feels like a step in the right direction. Now, we just have to figure out how and when to tell Justin and Kaitlyn, and brace ourselves for the fallout. I'm hoping, maybe naively, that this will finally be the end of it. That seeing the legal documents, the official stamp of approval on Ava's name, will finally make them understand that this is our decision and it's final. But honestly, with them, I'm not holding my breath. Update 2: Justin and Kaitlyn came over again yesterday. Another casual Sunday lunch visit. We were braced for it, Liam and I. We had the official birth certificate tucked away, ready to deploy like a secret weapon. The lunch started innocently enough. Small talk about the weather, polite inquiries about how we were sleeping, the usual grandparently fussing over Ava. But we knew it was only a matter of time before the name came up. And sure enough, about halfway through the meal, Kaitlyn steered the conversation in that direction. So, she said, her voice deceptively casual, have you two given any more thought to names? We were just talking to Richard and Margaret, and they were saying how much they love the name Beatrice. Beatrice Ava, that has a lovely flow, don't you think? Liam and I looked at each other. This was it. Time to unleash the birth certificate. Mom, Dad, Liam said, putting down his fork. Actually, Veronica and I have been meaning to talk to you about that. Justin and Kaitlyn perked up, their faces lighting up with what I can only describe as predatory hope. Oh, Justin said, leaning forward. Have you reconsidered? I took a deep breath and reached for my bag, pulling out the neatly folded birth certificate. We wanted to show you something, I said, unfolding the document and sliding it across the table towards them. Justin picked it up, his eyes scanning the page. Kaitlyn leaned over his shoulder, peering at the paper. Silence descended upon the table. A thick, heavy silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery from the other diners in the restaurant. I watched their faces. Justin's brow furrowed, his lips tightening into a thin line. Kaitlyn's eyes widened, her mouth slightly agape. They read it in silence, their expressions slowly shifting from hopeful anticipation to stunned disbelief, and then finally to simmering anger. Justin was the first to break the silence. He slammed the birth certificate back down on the table, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet. What is this? He demanded, his voice tight with suppressed fury. This is her birth certificate, Liam said calmly, trying to keep his voice even. We registered her name. Kaitlyn snatched up the document, her finger stabbing at the name printed clearly on the page. Ava, you went ahead and legally named her Ava, without even telling us. Her voice was rising, trembling with indignation. Mom, we've told you and Dad for weeks that we were naming her Ava, Liam said, his voice still calm but with a hint of steel creeping in. We thought we were clear. Clear, Kaitlyn shrieked, clear, after we've told you repeatedly how much we dislike this name. After we've given you so many lovely alternatives, you just ignored us, you just went behind our backs and did this. It's our baby, Mom, I said, finally speaking up, my voice firm. It's our decision, and yes, we registered her name, because we love it, and because it's her name. And frankly, because we were hoping that maybe, just maybe, seeing it in black and white would finally make you both understand that this is not up for debate anymore. My words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Justin's face was now a mask of cold fury. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. You did this deliberately, didn't you? He said, his voice low and menacing. You did this to spite us, too, to make us look foolish. No, Dad, that's not it at all, Liam interjected, trying to defuse the situation. We did it because we're her parents and it's our right to choose her name. And because we were hoping it would finally put an end to this constant pressure. Pressure, Kaitlyn scoffed. We're just expressing our opinion. We're just trying to help you see reason. This is our granddaughter, too, you know. We have a right to have a say in her name. No, Mom, you don't, Liam said, his voice now firm, unwavering. You have a right to your opinion, yes, but you don't have a right to dictate our decisions about our child. Ava is her name. And that's final. The silence descended again, even heavier and more suffocating than before. Justin and Kaitlyn stared at us, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. Then, without a word, Kaitlyn stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a loud scrape against the floor. Justin followed suit, his face grim. Fine, Kaitlyn spat, her voice dripping with venom. Fine, if that's how you want it. If you want to be so disrespectful, then fine. We're done. And with that, they turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Liam and me sitting there, staring at the birth certificate and the wreckage of a Sunday lunch and perhaps something much more significant. We sat there for a long time, the silence broken only by the soft cooing of Ava in her bassinet beside our table. We were both shaken and a little bit sad, but also, strangely, relieved. It was done. The line had been drawn. Ava's name was legally official. And maybe, just maybe, this was the end of the name debate. But I know, deep down, that this is just the beginning of a different kind of fallout. The fallout of standing up for ourselves, of asserting our parental autonomy, of finally saying no to Justin and Kaitlyn's relentless pressure. And I'm not sure what that fallout will look like. But I know, with absolute certainty, that we did the right thing, for Ava and for ourselves. The silence from Justin and Kaitlyn has been deafening. No calls, no texts, no visits. It's been almost a week since the restaurant lunch, since the birth certificate incident, as Liam and I have started jokingly calling it, and we haven't heard a peep from them. On one hand, it's blissfully peaceful. No more name suggestions, no more passive-aggressive comments, no more dreading their visits. On the other hand, it's unsettling. This is not how things usually are. Justin and Kaitlyn are usually very present, very involved in our lives. This complete radio silence is unusual. Liam has tried calling them a couple of times, just to check in, to see how they are, but they haven't answered. He sent them a text message, a simple hope you're okay, but no response. It's clear they're giving us the cold shoulder, a full-blown grandparental timeout. And honestly, I'm okay with it. Maybe it's what we needed. Maybe this distance will give them time to process, to cool down, to finally accept that Ava's name is Ava, and that's not changing. Maybe eventually they'll come around. Maybe they'll realize that their relationship with their granddaughter is more important than their opinion about her name. Maybe. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm hoping. In the meantime, Liam and I are enjoying the peace and quiet. We're focusing on Ava, on each other, on our little family. We're basking in the newborn bubble, without the constant interference of the name debate clouding everything. It's nice. It's what it should have been all along. And if Justin and Kaitlyn need some time to sulk, to process, to come to terms with it, then so be it. We've done our part. We've stood our ground. We've protected our decision, our daughter's name, and our parental autonomy. And that, in the end, is what matters most. Ava is Ava. And that's perfectly, beautifully, wonderfully okay. We wouldn't have it any other way. And hopefully, one day, neither will Justin and Kaitlyn. But for now, we're just going to enjoy our little Ava and the quiet that has finally descended upon our home. It's a satisfying quiet, a peaceful quiet, a quiet that feels right. And for the first time in weeks, I can truly relax and just be a mom to my daughter, Ava. And that's all I ever wanted. My husband had a secret vasectomy reversal 10 years ago, and now his ex-wife is pregnant. Is our marriage built on a decade of lies? It started with a phone call, a number I didn't recognize flashing on my screen as I was folding laundry. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Violet?" a hesitant voice asked, a woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes, speaking." There was a pause, a deep breath I could hear even through the phone. "My name is Jadden," she said, her voice gaining a bit of strength. I'm pregnant, and I need to talk to you about Paxton." My hands stilled, the neatly folded towel slipping from my grasp and falling back into the basket. Paxton. My husband, Paxton. What did he have to do with this stranger and her pregnancy? My mind raced, trying to catch up, to make sense of words that felt like they were spoken in a foreign language. "Paxton," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "My Paxton," Jadden's voice wavered. "Yes, Paxton, we've been seeing each other, and, well, I'm pregnant. And it's his." The world tilted. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the laundry basket forgotten. Paxton, cheating? It felt impossible. Paxton, who brought me coffee every morning, who still held my hand when we walked down the street, who always remembered our anniversary, even if I sometimes forgot. Paxton, who was infertile. "Jadden," I said, my voice shaking now, disbelief warring with a cold dread that was starting to seep into my bones. "Jadden, I think. There must be some mistake, Paxton. Paxton had a vasectomy, years ago. 10 years ago, at least." Silence descended on the other end of the line, thick and heavy. I could hear faint background noise, traffic maybe, or the hum of an office building. Then, a choked laugh, strained and disbelieving. "A vasectomy, are you sure?" He never said anything about that. "I'm sure," I said, my voice hardening with a sudden, sharp certainty. Paxton and I had been together for 15 years, married for 12. We'd talked about kids early on, decided it wasn't for us. And then, a few years into our marriage, Paxton had made the decision. It wasn't something we'd kept secret. It was a mutual decision, a closed chapter. He had it done after his first marriage ended. He was very clear about not wanting more children. Jadden was quiet again, the background noise on her end seeming to amplify the silence between us. "Well," she finally said, her voice tight, "he should have told me because I'm pregnant and he's the father." I don't understand," I stammered, my mind spinning. Could it be possible? Could the vasectomy have failed? 10 years seemed like a long time for that to go undetected. And Paxton, keeping something like this from me, it felt like a betrayal on top of a betrayal, layers of deception I couldn't even begin to unravel. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "I'm not saying you're lying. But this is a lot to take in. Paxton will be home soon. Maybe you should talk to him directly." "I have," Jadden said, her voice laced with a sudden edge. "I've talked to him. He's not exactly being helpful. He's denying everything. Says I'm lying, says I'm trying to trap him." My stomach clenched. That sounded like Paxton, or at least the Paxton I knew before this phone call. Defensive, quick to anger when cornered. But cheating, that was still so hard to reconcile with the man I thought I knew. He's probably just in shock," I offered weakly, feeling myself instinctively wanting to defend him, even as a cold suspicion started to curl in my gut. "Shock?" Jadden scoffed. "Honey, shock is finding out your dry cleaner lost your favorite shirt. This is a baby, his baby. And he's acting like I'm some gold digger trying to scam him." I don't know what to say," I admitted, feeling utterly lost. "Look," Jadden said, her voice softening slightly, I needed you to know, he's denying it, but I know it's his. And I need him to take responsibility, for the baby, for me." "Of course," I said, my voice hollow. "Of course, thank you for calling." We hung up, and I sat there, phone still clutched in my hand, staring blankly at the wall. Paxton, a mistress, a baby, and a vasectomy that should have made it all impossible. It was like a bizarre, twisted joke. When Paxton came home that evening, he found me sitting in the dark, the laundry still piled on the bed. "Violet, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the familiar face, the comforting smile, to the man who might be capable of this deception. "Paxton," I said, my voice flat, "I got a phone call today, from a woman. Named Jadden." His smile faltered, a flicker of something surprise, guilt crossing his face before he quickly masked it. "Jadden, I don't think I know anyone named Jadden," he said, his voice a little too casual, a little too quick. "She says she's pregnant," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. "And she says it's yours." The color drained from his face. He stared at me, his eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "What?" he finally managed to stammer. That's insane. Who is this woman? What's she talking about?" "Her name is Jadden," I repeated, watching him carefully. "And she says you've been seeing each other." "Seeing each other?" he scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. "Violet, you know that's not true. I would never cheat on you." "But she says she's pregnant," I pressed, needing to hear him say it to see his reaction. "She's lying," he said, his voice rising, anger starting to replace the initial shock. "She's a liar. She's trying to cause trouble." "You don't believe her, do you, Violet? You believe me, right?" He stepped closer, reaching for my hands, but I pulled back, unable to bear his touch. "Paxton," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "you had a vasectomy." He stopped, his hand hovering in the air. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something in them I didn't recognize. Not guilt, not exactly, but fear. "Yes," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Yes, I did. 10 years ago, so this woman, this Jadden, she's clearly mistaken, or she's got the wrong guy." He said it with conviction, with the familiar Paxton certainty, and for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I almost believed him. Almost. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already starting to take root. Update 1 the DNA test came back yesterday. Negative. Paxton is not the father. We got the results online, a sterile, impersonal PDF document that confirmed what we already knew, or what I thought we knew. Paxton let out a sigh of relief so loud it filled the room. He grabbed my hands, his eyes shining with triumph. "See, I told you she was lying. I told you it wasn't possible." He was almost giddy, the anger and defensiveness from the initial phone call completely gone, replaced by a self-righteous vindication. "It's over now, right?" he asked, squeezing my hands. "We can just forget about this whole crazy thing. This Jadden woman will go away and we can just go back to normal." Go back to normal. The words echoed in my mind, hollow and meaningless. Could we ever go back to normal after this? After the phone call, the accusations, the doubt that had crept into our lives like a cold draft. Maybe, I said, pulling my hands away, the relief I should have felt strangely absent. Maybe it is over. Paxton frowned, sensing my hesitation. What's wrong? We have proof. It's not his baby. What more do you want? I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair, feeling a headache starting to throb behind my eyes. It's not that simple, is it? He stared at me, his brow furrowed. Of course it is. She lied. She tried to. I don't even know what she was trying to do, but it's over now. We can move on. But Jadden didn't move on. The day after we got the DNA results, I received another call from her. This time, her voice was different. Gone was the hesitation, the wavering uncertainty. Now it was hard, determined, almost accusing. You got the results, didn't you? She said, her voice flat. Yes, I said, bracing myself. The test was negative. Paxton is not the father. There was a long pause, longer than the previous silences. I could hear her breathing, shallow and rapid. Negative, she repeated, the word laced with disbelief. That's not possible. It is possible, Jadden, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, patient. It's been proven. Paxton had a vasectomy. He can't be the father. But it has to be him, she insisted, her voice rising again, bordering on hysteria. There's no one else. I haven't been with anyone else. It has to be Paxton. I'm sorry, Jadden, I said, feeling a strange mix of pity and frustration. I really am, but the test is conclusive. Maybe there's been a mistake somewhere. Maybe you need to consider other possibilities. No, she shouted, the force of her voice making me flinch. There are no other possibilities. It's Paxton. It's always been Paxton. He knows it deep down. He's just scared. Scared? I asked, bewildered. Why would he be scared? He's not the father. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. Oh, he's scared, all right. Scared of what you'll do when you find out the truth. The truth, I repeated, my heart starting to pound again, a fresh wave of unease washing over me. What truth? There is no truth, Jadden. The test proves it. You think you know everything about your husband, Violet, don't you? She said, her voice suddenly low and menacing. You think you know him so well, but you don't. You have no idea who he really is. No idea what he's capable of. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice trembling now. Paxton and I, she said, pausing for dramatic effect, we've known each other for a long time, Violet, longer than you think. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I asked, the words catching in my throat. Let's just say, Jadden said, a chillingly calm tone returning to her voice, that 10 years ago, when Paxton supposedly had his vasectomy, well, things weren't exactly as straightforward as he's led you to believe. She hung up then, leaving me reeling, the phone slipping from my numb fingers and clattering to the floor. 10 years ago, when Paxton had his vasectomy. What was Jadden implying? What wasn't straightforward? My mind raced, trying to piece it together, to make sense of her cryptic words, her unsettling certainty. 10 years ago. That was around the time Paxton's first marriage had ended. He'd always been vague about the details, just said it was messy, painful. He'd never talked about his ex-wife much, just dismissed her as crazy and unstable. Could Jadden be connected to his first marriage? Could she be? His ex-wife? No, that was impossible. Paxton's ex-wife's name was… I couldn't even remember her name. He'd erased her so completely from his life, from our life, that it was like she'd never existed. But what if she had? What if Jadden was somehow connected to that past? A past Paxton had kept hidden from me. A past that held secrets that could shatter everything I thought I knew about my husband. The DNA test might prove Paxton wasn't the father of Jadden's baby, but it didn't prove anything else. It didn't prove he was innocent. It didn't prove he was the man I thought I knew. And suddenly, the negative result, the supposed end of the story, felt like just the beginning. Update 2, I spent the last few days in a daze, Jadden's words echoing in my head, her unsettling certainty gnawing at my peace. Paxton, oblivious, seemed to think everything was back to normal. He was lighter, happier, almost smug. He kept asking if we could finally put this behind us, if we could get back to being us. But us felt different now, fractured, like a mirror that had been shattered and hastily glued back together, the cracks still visible, the reflection distorted. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't ignore Jadden's insinuations, her hints at a hidden past. I needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. So I started digging. It wasn't easy. Paxton was a private man, especially about his past. He'd always deflected questions about his first marriage, changed the subject whenever it came up. It was like a forbidden topic, a closed door I'd never dared to open. But now, I had to. I started with the internet, a digital detective, searching for any trace of Paxton's first marriage. It took hours, days even, sifting through online records, social media ghosts, old newspaper archives. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, a phantom marriage that seemed to have vanished without a trace. Then, almost by accident, I stumbled upon something. An old online forum, a support group for people dealing with infertility. And there, buried in a thread from over 10 years ago, a post from someone with a username I vaguely recognized, a username Paxton had used for online gaming back in college. The post was about vasectomy reversal. It was short, cryptic, almost hidden within the larger conversation, but the words jumped out at me, burned into my brain. Considering reversal, wife wants kids now, complicated history. Wife wants kids now, complicated history. My breath hitched. Wife, Paxton's first wife, he'd never mentioned a wife wanting kids. He'd always portrayed his first marriage as a brief, youthful mistake, a relationship that had ended quickly and painlessly. But this hinted at something deeper, something more complex. I dug deeper into the forum, searching for other posts by the same username, and then I found it. A post from a few weeks later, a follow-up to the vasectomy reversal thread. It was longer, more detailed, filled with raw emotion, with pain and regret. It talked about the reversal surgery, about the hope of starting a family, about the fear of failure, about the love for his wife, and the devastation when she left him, leaving him alone with his reversed vasectomy and his shattered dreams of fatherhood. And then, the name. Buried in the post, almost as an afterthought, a throwaway line about his wife's struggles, her pain, her anger, her name. Jadin. My heart stopped. Jadin, the woman who had called me, the woman who was pregnant, the woman who was so certain Paxton was the father. Jadin. Paxton's first wife, his ex-wife. The woman he had never mentioned, the woman he had erased from his past, the woman he had lied to me about for 15 years. And then it clicked. Jadin's words, her certainty, her accusations. 10 years ago, when Paxton supposedly had his vasectomy, well, things weren't exactly as straightforward as he's led you to believe. The vasectomy hadn't been straightforward. It had been reversed, and Paxton had never told me. Never. He'd let me believe he was infertile, let me think we were both on the same page about not wanting children. He'd built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies, a carefully constructed facade of shared desires and mutual understanding. And now, Jadin was pregnant. Not with a miracle baby, not with a failed vasectomy baby, but with a baby conceived after a vasectomy reversal he'd kept secret for a decade. The negative DNA test didn't exonerate Paxton, it condemned him. It proved he was lying. It proved he was hiding something. And it proved that Jadin, the woman I dismissed as a liar and a gold digger, had been telling the truth all along. The truth that Paxton, my husband, was not the man I thought I knew, and that our marriage, our life together, was built on a lie so profound, so devastating, that I didn't know if it could ever be salvaged. The resolution, I realized, wasn't going to be neat. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be necessary. Because the truth, however painful, was the only way forward. My cousin stole my volunteer work and claimed my ideas at the animal shelter, so I exposed her rejected application to my family. It's been something I've been quietly doing for years, volunteering at the local animal shelter. It started in college when I needed something to distract me from exam stress, and it just kind of stuck. Now, even with a full-time job and life being generally hectic, I still manage to carve out a few hours every week to walk dogs, clean kennels, or help out at adoption events. It's genuinely rewarding, and the animals are just the best. Recently, my cousin Evangeline has started volunteering there too. At first, I was honestly thrilled. We've never really had a lot in common, Evangeline and I. She's always been more into the social scene, designer clothes, and what's trending on Instagram, while I'm more of a sweatpants and rescue dog kind of person. So when she mentioned she was looking for something fulfilling to do and thought about volunteering, I immediately suggested the shelter. She seemed genuinely enthusiastic and said she loved animals, especially dogs. I even introduced her to the volunteer coordinator, Sage, who is an absolute saint and makes everyone feel welcome. For the first few weeks, things were great. We'd sometimes volunteer on the same days, and it was actually nice to have someone from the family there. We'd chat while cleaning or prepping food, and it felt like we were finally connecting on something meaningful. But then, things started to shift, subtly at first. It began with Evangeline posting more and more about her volunteering on social media. Pictures of her cuddling puppies, videos of her walking dogs in the park, captions about how blessed she felt to be helping these precious souls. Okay, Fine, social media is her thing, I get it. But then she started talking about her ideas at the shelter. Things like suggesting a new fundraising campaign or a different approach to adoption events. Except, these weren't her ideas. They were things I had mentioned in passing, things Sage had already implemented or just general shelter practices. It was weird, but I brushed it off. Maybe she just forgot where she heard them, or was genuinely thinking along the same lines. Then, at a family dinner last week, my aunt, Evangeline's mom, was gushing about how amazing Evangeline was, how she was doing such incredible work at the animal shelter and coming up with all these brilliant initiatives. She even mentioned a specific idea, a puppy playdate day to increase adoptions, which was something I had actually proposed to Sage months ago and had been working on organizing. I was a bit taken aback and tried to gently interject, mentioning that it was something I was already involved in, but Evangeline quickly steered the conversation in another direction, talking about some other amazing project she was spearheading. It felt off, like she was intentionally trying to take credit. I don't know, maybe I'm being overly sensitive. It's just volunteering after all. It's not a competition, but it's starting to feel like one, and I'm not sure I like it. I really hope I'm just imagining things, and that Evangeline isn't actually trying to steal my thunder, especially when it comes to something I genuinely care about. It's just unsettling. Update 1 okay, so it's definitely not in my head. Evangeline is absolutely, unequivocally, trying to take credit for my volunteer work, and it's getting worse. This past weekend, the shelter had a big adoption drive at a local park. It was the puppy playdate day that I had been working on, coordinating with Sage and the other volunteers for weeks. Evangeline was there, of course, and she was everywhere. She was charming potential adopters, playing with puppies, and generally being very visible. Which, again, is fine. Volunteers are supposed to be helpful and engaging. But then I started overhearing snippets of her conversations with people. Things like, "Oh yes, this puppy playdate was my idea. I really wanted to make it more fun and interactive for families." Or, "I'm so passionate about finding homes for these animals. I've been working tirelessly on this event." Tirelessly. She showed up for maybe 2 volunteer shifts in the past month and mostly took selfies with the puppies. And my idea? Seriously. I even saw her talking to a local news reporter who was covering the event. I watched from a distance as she smiled brightly and gestured expansively, probably taking full credit for the whole thing. I was starting to feel genuinely angry. It wasn't just annoying anymore, it felt disrespectful. It's not about the credit, not really. It's about the principle. It's about someone waltzing in, doing the bare minimum, and then trying to claim they're the driving force behind something they had little to no involvement in. After the event, I decided I needed to talk to her directly. I texted her and asked if we could grab coffee. She agreed, and we met up yesterday afternoon. I tried to be calm and reasonable. I started by saying how great it was that she was volunteering and how much I appreciated her help at the adoption drive. Then, I gently brought up the things I had overheard. "Evangeline," I said, "I noticed you were mentioning that the puppy playdate was your idea. I just wanted to clarify because it was actually something Sage and I had planned a while ago." She just laughed, a dismissive little laugh. "Oh, Olivia, don't be so sensitive," she said, rolling her eyes. "I was just being enthusiastic. You know how I am. I'm a people person, I like to get everyone excited. But you were saying it was your asterisk idea," I pressed, trying to keep my voice even. "That's not exactly being enthusiastic, it's taking credit," she sighed dramatically. "Olivia, seriously, you're being ridiculous. Are you jealous? Is that what this is about? Because you've been volunteering longer, relax, it's just a puppy playdate, it's not like we're curing cancer." Jealous? Of what? Of her taking credit for something I did? Of her shallow social media posts? Of her blatant disregard for the truth? I felt a surge of frustration. "It's not about jealousy, Evangeline," I said, trying to keep my temper in check. "It's about honesty and integrity. It's about giving credit where credit is due. It's about not pretending you did something you didn't." She just scoffed again. "Oh, please, integrity, over volunteering at an animal shelter. Get a grip, Olivia, it's not that serious. Everyone knows you're the charity case in the family, always volunteering, always trying to be the good one. Maybe I just wanted a little bit of that good girl shine for myself. Charity case family. Good girl shine." I was honestly speechless, the sheer audacity of it, and the blatant jealousy dripping from her words. It was suddenly clear. This wasn't about miscommunication or forgetfulness. This was deliberate. She was intentionally trying to diminish my contributions and elevate herself, all for some kind of twisted social validation. I just stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. You know what, Evangeline, I said, finally finding my voice. You can have the good girl shine. You can have all the credit you want. But just know that everyone who actually matters, everyone at the shelter, everyone who genuinely cares about the animals, they know who does the real work. And it's definitely not you. I got up and left, leaving her sitting there, looking slightly stunned. I don't know what I expected to achieve by talking to her, but it definitely didn't make me feel better. In fact, it made me feel worse. Worse about her and worse about the whole situation. It's one thing to be a bit clueless or self-absorbed, but this feels malicious. And it makes me wonder, how far is she willing to go to get this good girl shine? It's a really unsettling thought. Update 2. I'm beyond furious. Absolutely livid. And I'm at a crossroads, feeling like I have to make a choice that I really don't want to make. But first, let me explain what happened. Today was the annual Shelter Supporters Gala, a big fundraising event that the shelter holds every year. It's a pretty fancy affair with dinner, speeches, and an auction. I've always helped out with the organization, usually behind the scenes, helping Sage with logistics and volunteer coordination. This year, because of the puppy playdate's success, Sage asked me to give a short speech at the gala, talking about the importance of community involvement and volunteerism. I was a little nervous. Public speaking isn't really my thing, but I agreed. I worked hard on my speech, wanting to make it heartfelt and genuine, focusing on the animals and the amazing work the shelter does. Evangeline was also invited to the gala, as a volunteer, obviously. She was there with my aunt and uncle, dressed to the nines, looking like she was ready for the red carpet. Everything was going fine, the dinner was nice, the auction was raising good money, and then it was time for the volunteer speeches. Sage introduced me first, and I went up and gave my speech. I talked about why I volunteer, what the shelter means to me, and shared a few heartwarming stories about animals we've helped. I thought it went okay, people seemed to be listening, and I got a polite round of applause when I finished. Then, Sage introduced Evangeline, and that's when it all went downhill. Evangeline walked up to the podium, beaming, and launched into her speech. Except, it wasn't a speech about volunteering. It was a speech about herself. She started by talking about how she discovered her passion for animal welfare, how she felt this calling to help animals in need. Then she went on to talk about her vision for the shelter, her innovative ideas, and her dedication to making a difference. She even mentioned the puppy playdate, again taking full credit, saying it was just one example of her commitment to creative fundraising. But the worst part, the absolute gut punch, was when she started talking about my speech. She actually had the audacity to say, as you just heard from my colleague, it's so important to have people involved in the day-to-day operations. But what we really need is vision. We need leadership. We need people who can think big and inspire change. Colleague, leadership, inspire change. She was literally standing there on stage in front of hundreds of people, implying that my speech was just about the day-to-day stuff, while hers was about the visionary stuff. She was subtly, but unmistakably, positioning herself as the leader, the innovator, the important volunteer, and me as just some background helper. I was sitting at my table, absolutely frozen. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My aunt and uncle were beaming at her, nodding enthusiastically. My husband was looking at me, his face a mix of shock and anger. When she finally finished, after what felt like an eternity of self-aggrandizing nonsense, there was polite applause again. Sage looked uncomfortable, to say the least. I just sat there, seething. The nerve, the sheer, unmitigated gall of this woman. I wanted to storm up to the stage, grab the microphone, and expose her for the fraud she is. But I didn't. I just sat there, paralyzed by anger and disbelief. After the speeches, people started mingling. Evangeline, of course, was holding court, surrounded by a small group of people, probably still talking about her vision. My aunt came over to our table, practically glowing. Wasn't Evangeline just amazing, she gushed. So articulate, so passionate. She really has a gift for this kind of thing. I just stared at her, speechless. My husband, bless his heart, finally spoke up. Actually, Aunt Carol, he said, his voice tight, Olivia's the one who's been volunteering at the shelter for years. She's the one who actually does the work. Evangeline just started a few weeks ago. My aunt looked surprised, then slightly dismissive. Oh well, it's great that they're both involved, she said, waving her hand dismissively. It's wonderful to see the younger generation getting so engaged. She's not engaged, she's a credit-stealing, self-serving. I couldn't even find the words. That's when I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not just for myself, but for all the genuine volunteers at the shelter. For Sage, who works tirelessly and never seeks recognition, and most importantly, for the animals who deserve real help, not just empty words and stolen credit. I've been holding on to something I haven't wanted to use, something that feels like crossing a line. But after tonight, after seeing her blatant manipulation and the way my family is just eating it up, I'm starting to think maybe it's the only way. Years ago, Evangeline applied to volunteer at the shelter. She was rejected, not because she's a bad person, but because her application was, well, let's just say it wasn't great. Sage, being the kind and discreet person she is, mentioned it to me in passing, years ago, asking for my advice on how to gently break the news to Evangeline. I remember seeing the application, and honestly, it was pretty revealing. It was full of vague statements about loving animals, but lacked any real commitment or understanding of what volunteering actually entails. There were even some questionable things in there, things that raised red flags about her motivations. I still have a copy of that application. I've kept it, tucked away in a file, never thinking I'd actually use it. But now I'm seriously considering it. I'm considering showing everyone. Showing my family, showing people at the shelter, showing anyone who's listening Evangeline's rejected volunteer application. It feels drastic, mean-spirited, like sinking to her level. But honestly, I'm at my wit's end. She's not just taking credit, she's actively undermining my work, belittling my contributions, and making me look like some kind of mindless drone while she's the visionary leader. I feel like I have to do something. I feel like I have to expose the truth. But is it the right thing to do? Is it going too far? I'm torn, I'm angry, and I just don't know what to do next. Resolution: I did it. I showed everyone, I sent an email. A group email, to be precise. To my aunt and uncle, to a few other family members who were at the gala, to Sage, and to a couple of other long-term volunteers at the shelter who I trust implicitly. The email was simple, direct, and contained no embellishment or emotional language. It just stated the facts. It explained that I had been volunteering at the shelter for years, outlined some of my key contributions, and then attached Evangeline's rejected volunteer application from years ago. I didn't explicitly accuse her of anything. I didn't need to. The application spoke for itself. The vague, self-serving statements, the lack of genuine interest, the red flags about her motivations. It was all there, in black and white. I sent the email late last night, after agonizing over it for hours. I barely slept, my stomach churning with anxiety. I kept second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being petty, vindictive, if I was overreacting, if I was making a huge mistake. But then I'd remember Evangeline's speech, her dismissive laughter, her calculated credit stealing, and I'd feel a surge of resolve. This wasn't about being petty. It was about protecting my integrity, protecting the shelter, and protecting the animals from someone who was clearly more interested in self-promotion than genuine help. This morning, the fallout began. My phone started blowing up with notifications. Texts, calls, emails, social media messages. My aunt called, absolutely furious. "How dare you?" she screamed into the phone. "How dare you try to humiliate Evangeline like this? You're jealous, you're bitter, you're ruining her reputation." I calmly told her to read the application again, and then hung up. My uncle texted, a slightly more measured but still accusatory message, saying I was creating unnecessary drama and should have handled this privately. I ignored it. Other family members were more supportive, or at least, more understanding. A few cousins texted, expressing shock and saying they always suspected Evangeline was a bit performative. One even admitted they had volunteered with her once and found her to be more interested in taking photos than actually helping. Sage called, her voice quiet but firm. "Olivia," she said, "I'm so sorry you had to do this. But honestly, thank you. I've been uncomfortable with Evangeline's behavior, but I didn't know how to address it. This clarifies things." He also mentioned that a few other long-term volunteers who received the email were equally appalled and grateful for the clarification. The biggest reaction, though, was from Evangeline herself. She texted me a string of angry, incoherent messages, calling me names, accusing me of being a psychopath, threatening to ruin my life. I just blocked her number. Later in the day, I got a visit from my aunt and uncle. They came to my house, looking somber and subdued. They didn't scream or yell this time. They just talked. They admitted they were shocked and disappointed by Evangeline's speech, and even more so by her rejected application. They said they had always wanted to believe the best in her, but this was hard to ignore. They apologized for their initial reaction, for being dismissive of my concerns. They said they were going to have a serious conversation with Evangeline, and while they still loved her, they needed to address her behavior and help her understand the consequences of her actions. They didn't explicitly say they were taking my side, but it was clear that they finally understood. And that, honestly, was enough. I still feel conflicted. Relieved, yes, that the truth is out, that Evangeline's charade has been exposed. But also, sad. Sad that it had to come to this. Sad that my cousin, someone I once hoped to connect with, turned out to be so. Self-absorbed and dishonest. And yes, a little bit guilty. Guilty for revealing her rejected application, for airing her dirty laundry, even if it felt necessary. It wasn't a clean victory. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a resolution. A messy, complicated, but ultimately satisfying resolution. The charity, hopefully, will be better off. The truth, finally, is out in the open. And maybe, just maybe, Evangeline will learn something from this whole ordeal. Maybe she'll learn that genuine help is more rewarding than stolen credit, that true recognition comes from honest work, and that integrity, in the end, is worth more than any good girl's shine. I hope so. For her sake, and for everyone else's.
My sister's wife tried to poison my son with peanut brownies at his school play because she didn't believe in his allergy. What should I do? It started innocently enough, a family barbecue at my sister Amber's place. My son, Kyle, who's 12, has a pretty severe peanut allergy. We're careful, hypervigilant, really. It's not just hives and itching, it can escalate fast. We carry EpiPens, read every label, and generally avoid situations where cross-contamination is a risk. Amber knows this. Everyone in the family knows this. But Amber's wife, Rosalie, well, she's always been skeptical. Rosalie is a force of nature, loud, opinionated, and convinced she knows best about everything. She's never outright dismissed Kyle's allergy, not in front of us anyway, but there's always been this undercurrent of disbelief. A raised eyebrow when we ask about ingredients, a comment about kids being dramatic these days, little digs that accumulate. Honestly, I've mostly ignored it for Amber's sake. Amber's my sister, and I love her, even if her choice in partners sometimes baffles me. At this barbecue, Kyle was having a good time, playing catch with my nephew, laughing with his cousins. He'd eaten a hot dog and some potato salad, both things I'd checked ingredients on myself, and he seemed fine. Then Rosalie came over, beaming, holding a plate piled high with brownies. "Kyle, honey, I made these just for you. Peanut-free special recipe," she announced, her voice booming over the general chatter. My internal alarms went off immediately. "Rosalie, that's really thoughtful, but we brought our own dessert for Kyle, just to be safe," I said, trying to keep my tone light but firm. She waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense, Jace. I know what I'm doing. I used almond flour, completely peanut-free. Go on, Kyle, try one." Kyle, bless his heart, looked hesitant, glancing at me for guidance. He's been taught since he was tiny, never eat anything unless dad or mom says it's okay. "Rosalie, really, we appreciate it, but we'll stick with what we brought," I repeated, a little sharper this time. Amber, who'd been chatting with another cousin, turned to look, a flicker of concern in her eyes. Rosalie's smile tightened, just a fraction, but enough for me to notice. "Oh, come on, Jace. Are you saying you don't trust me? I wouldn't hurt Kyle. Don't you think I'm capable of making peanut-free brownies?" The subtle challenge was clear. It wasn't about Kyle anymore. It was about her proving something. To me, to herself, I don't know, but I knew this was a situation I needed to diffuse quickly. "Rosalie, it's not about trust. It's about Kyle's health. It's a serious allergy and we're just cautious." "No offense meant," I said, hoping to finally shut it down, but Rosalie wasn't done. She lowered her voice, but it still carried, a stage whisper designed to be overheard. "Or is it that you think he's just faking it? You know, some kids exaggerate these things for attention." My blood ran cold. Faking it? Did she really just say that? I looked at Kyle, who was now staring at the ground, his face flushing. He's a sensitive kid, and he's heard whispers before, kids in school who think he's making a fuss. But to hear it from an adult, from his aunt, essentially in front of everyone, it was cruel. "Rosalie, that's completely inappropriate," Amber said, stepping forward, finally intervening. Her voice was low, but with an edge I rarely heard. "Kyle's allergy is real, and it's not a joke." Rosalie just scoffed, tossing her head. "Oh, Amber, always so dramatic. I was just saying, sometimes kids play things up. No need to get your knickers in a twist." I wanted to explode. I wanted to grab those brownies and shove them right back in her face, but I took a deep breath, for Kyle's sake. I knelt down beside him, putting an arm around his shoulders. "Hey, buddy, you okay?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded, still looking down. "Yeah, Dad, just hungry." I stood up, facing Rosalie, my voice now dangerously calm. "Kyle's hungry. We're going to go get him something he can actually eat. Thanks for the offer, Rosalie, but no thank you." I took Kyle's hand and walked away, leaving Rosalie standing there, a thunderous look on her face. Amber followed us a few minutes later, apologizing profusely. She was furious with Rosalie, she said, and promised to talk to her. But the damage was done. The afternoon was soured. And that comment, faking it, it burrowed under my skin. It wasn't just dismissive, it was actively malicious. And it sparked something in me, a protective rage I hadn't felt in a long time. I just didn't know how far that rage would take me, or what Rosalie was truly capable of. Update 1. The barbecue incident hung heavy in the air for weeks. Amber apologized again and again, said she'd had a serious conversation with Rosalie, but honestly, I didn't see much change. Rosalie remained distant, coolly polite, but with that simmering undercurrent of disdain. I kept Kyle away from their house, and truthfully, I didn't want to be around Rosalie myself. Then came the school play. Kyle had landed a small but speaking role in the middle school production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. He was so excited, rehearsing his lines constantly, practically vibrating with nervous energy. The whole family was planning to go, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, the works. Amber and Rosalie were, of course, invited. The day of the play arrived. We were all dressed up, buzzing with anticipation. Kyle was backstage, getting into costume, and my wife, Sarah, and I were finding our seats in the packed auditorium. I spotted Amber and Rosalie a few rows ahead and gave a small, polite wave. Amber smiled back, but Rosalie just turned her head away. Fine by me. The play started, and Kyle was fantastic. He delivered his lines perfectly, his voice clear and strong, even managing a few comedic flourishes that had the audience laughing. Sarah and I were beaming with pride. During intermission, I went to find Kyle backstage to tell him how great he was doing. That's when I saw it. The chaos, the panic, the flurry of activity around the snack table, and in the center of it all, Kyle, pale as a ghost, clutching his throat, struggling to breathe. My heart leaped into my throat. Peanut reaction. But how? We'd been so careful. The school was usually really good about allergies. I pushed through the crowd, adrenaline surging. Kyle, what happened? He could barely speak, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Brownie, someone, gave me, he choked out, pointing weakly at a plate of brownies on the snack table. Brownies. Rosalie's brownies. The ones she'd offered him at the barbecue. The ones she'd insisted were peanut-free. Rage, cold and furious, washed over me. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on Rosalie, standing near the back, watching the scene unfold with a disturbingly intense expression. It wasn't concern, it was something else. Something almost triumphant. I grabbed the plate of brownies, my hands shaking. I smelled them, a faint but unmistakable whiff of peanut. Peanut flour, peanut oil. I didn't know, didn't care. All I knew was that my son, my child, was suffering, struggling to breathe. Because of these brownies, because of Rosalie. Someone, a teacher I think, was already calling for the school nurse, grabbing an EpiPen from the emergency kit. I helped Kyle sit down, loosening his tie, trying to keep him calm while the nurse rushed over. Sarah was right beside me, her face etched with worry, holding Kyle's hand. As the nurse administered the EpiPen, relief slowly started to spread through Kyle's body. His breathing eased, the color returned to his face, the panic in his eyes began to recede. It was working. But the terror, the sheer, gut-wrenching terror of seeing my son like that, it was still raw, still vibrating through me. Once Kyle was stable, breathing normally, though still shaken, I turned to face Rosalie. She was still standing there near the back, her expression now, nervous, uneasy. She met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Rosalie," I said, my voice low and dangerous, barely a whisper. Did you bring those brownies?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly, her eyes darting around the room. "Yes," I thought, "it would be a nice surprise." "Peanut-free," I pressed, holding up the plate, the faint peanut smell still clinging to the air. She stammered, avoiding my gaze. "Well, mostly, I might have used a little peanut butter chips for decoration." Peanut butter chips for decoration. On brownies she knew were for a school play where she knew my son, with his life-threatening peanut allergy, would be. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate, it was intentional, it was an attack. The rage that had been simmering within me erupted. It wasn't cold anymore, it was white-hot, consuming. I didn't shout, didn't scream. My voice remained low, almost conversational, but with a chilling intensity that seemed to silence the entire room. "Rosalie," I said again, each word a hammer blow. "You tried to poison my son." Update 2. The aftermath of the school play was, well, it was a mess. The principal, alerted to the situation, was understandably horrified. The play was cancelled for the night, the auditorium cleared, and Rosalie was escorted out, Amber walking beside her, her face a mask of fury and shame. Kyle, thankfully, recovered quickly after the EpiPen and some monitoring by the school nurse. He was shaken, emotionally more than physically, but he was okay. Sarah stayed with him, comforting him while I dealt with the fallout. Amber called me later that night, her voice trembling. She was beyond devastated, beyond angry. She'd confronted Rosalie, demanded an explanation. Rosalie's excuse. She hadn't meant to hurt Kyle. She just wanted to prove to me, to everyone, that his allergy wasn't as serious as we made out. She'd used peanut butter chips, just a few because almond brownies are boring, and she thought a little bit wouldn't hurt. A little bit wouldn't hurt. These were the words of someone completely detached from reality, completely devoid of empathy, completely and utterly dangerous. Amber was done. Completely, irrevocably done. She'd asked Rosalie to leave, packed her bags for her, and told her to never contact her again. 15 years together, gone, in a flash of calculated cruelty and breathtaking stupidity. But the consequences didn't end there. My words, "You tried to poison my son," they echoed in my own head, growing louder, more insistent. It wasn't just hyperbole, it was the truth. Rosalie had intentionally, knowingly, given Kyle a food he was deathly allergic to in a public place, knowing full well the potential consequences. It wasn't a prank, it wasn't a joke. It was attempted harm, at the very least. Sarah, seeing the storm brewing in my eyes, gently suggested, "Jace, maybe you should talk to the police." The police. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind, but as I considered it, the more sense it made. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a serious incident, a potential crime. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a report. I explained everything: the barbecue incident, Rosalie's skepticism, the brownies at the school play, Kyle's reaction, Rosalie's admission. The officer listened patiently, taking detailed notes, his expression growing increasingly grim. A few days later, I got a call from a detective. They were taking the case seriously. They'd spoken to the school principal, the nurse, Amber, and even Rosalie herself. Rosalie, predictably, had tried to downplay it, to paint herself as a well-meaning aunt who'd made a silly mistake, but the evidence was overwhelming. The brownies tested positive for peanuts. Rosalie admitted to bringing them, and her motive, however twisted and delusional, was clear. The detective informed me that they were charging Rosalie with reckless endangerment and aggravated assault, due to the use of a food as a weapon and the potential for serious bodily harm. Criminal charges against my sister's wife, against someone who had, for years, been a part of our family, however tenuously. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, a sense of justice being served. Rosalie had tried to hurt my son, and now she was facing the consequences. But another part of me felt sick. This was Amber's wife, the woman she'd loved, the woman who was now facing jail time because of her own appalling actions. It was a tragedy all around. Amber, when I told her about the charges, just sighed, a long, weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. I knew it was bad, Jace, but I didn't realize criminal charges bad. She wasn't angry, she was just numb, hollowed out by the betrayal, the shame, the sheer horror of what Rosalie had done. She was worried about Rosalie, yes, but also terrified of what this meant for her own future, for her own family. I don't know what's going to happen next. Rosalie is out on bail, awaiting trial. Amber is trying to rebuild her life alone, and Kyle is still processing everything. He's safe, physically, but the emotional scars are still there. He's more anxious now, more hesitant to trust, more aware of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even seemingly familiar faces. I never wanted this. I never wanted to see Rosalie face criminal charges. All I wanted was for her to respect my son, to acknowledge his allergy, to treat him with basic human decency. But Rosalie's need to prove something, her twisted sense of superiority, it led her down a dark path, a path that has now shattered her own life and cast a long, chilling shadow over ours. And all because she couldn't believe, or wouldn't believe, that a child's allergy was real. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can encounter isn't malice, but arrogance, disguised as well-meaning ignorance. My wife's best friend moved in with us after her divorce, but I discovered she sold her house months before needing our help, and now she's lying to us. What do I do? My wife Reese's best friend Bella is going through a divorce. It's been messy apparently, though Reese has been mostly shielding me from the worst of it. I know Bella and her husband Caden were fighting a lot recently, and then suddenly, boom, divorce papers. Reese is heartbroken for Bella, of course. They've been inseparable since college. Honestly, I've always felt a little like an outsider looking in on their friendship, but I've never minded. Bella's always been nice enough to me, if a little dramatic. So when Reese came to me last week, eyes red-rimmed, and asked if Bella could stay with us for a bit, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Just until she gets her feet back under her, Reese explained. You know, somewhere safe to land while she figures things out. I nodded, picturing Bella adrift, needing a lifeline. We have a spare bedroom that mostly collects dust, perfect for a temporary guest. We spent the weekend cleaning it out, putting fresh sheets on the bed, making it feel welcoming. Bella arrived on Monday, looking smaller than usual, her eyes puffy. She had a suitcase, a duffel bag, and a box filled with what looked like mostly photo albums. "Thank you, guys," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she hugged Reese tightly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Reese squeezed her back, murmuring comforting words. I offered to help Bella with her bags, but she waved me off. "It's okay, Milo, I got it. It's not much anyway." She disappeared into the spare room, and Reese and I exchanged a look. "Poor thing," Reese sighed. "She must be devastated." I agreed, feeling a pang of sympathy for Bella. Divorce is awful, especially when it's unexpected. We made dinner that night, a simple pasta dish, and Bella joined us at the table, picking at her food. She mostly listened while Reese and I talked, occasionally interjecting with a quiet comment or a sad smile. Later, after Bella had retreated to her room, Reese sat beside me on the couch, leaning her head on my shoulder. "She seems so lost," Reese whispered. "I hate seeing her like this." "Give her time," I said, wrapping an arm around her. "She'll get through it. We'll help her." We both assumed it would be a week, maybe two, until Bella found a new apartment, a fresh start. We were happy to offer her a safe haven in the meantime. It felt like the right thing to do for a friend in need. Weeks have passed, and Bella is still with us. The spare bedroom is no longer quite so spare. It's become Bella's temporary domain, filled with her clothes, toiletries, and growing piles of books and magazines. At first, it was fine, even comforting to have her around. Reese and Bella spent hours talking in low voices, catching up, reminiscing. I joined them sometimes, listening to their stories, offering a male perspective when Reese asked for it. But lately, a subtle shift has occurred. Bella isn't actively figuring things out. There are no apartment viewings, no frantic job searches, no calls to movers. She spends her days lounging on the couch, watching daytime TV, or scrolling through her phone. She helps with dinner sometimes, setting the table or chopping vegetables, but mostly she seems content to be taken care of. Reese, ever the empathetic soul, is starting to look a little strained. She's still fiercely protective of Bella, but I can sense a growing unease in her. "She's just grieving, Milo," Reese said last week when I gently suggested Bella might be overstaying her welcome. "It takes time to heal from something like this." I understood that, I really did, but something felt off. Bella's stories about the divorce were becoming less frequent, less detailed. When Reese asked about her house hunting, Bella would vaguely wave her hand and say, "Oh, you know, it's all so stressful. I just need a little more time to process everything." I started noticing little inconsistencies. One day, Bella mentioned a conversation she had with her realtor about finding a place closer to her work. The next, she was complaining about how expensive rent was in the city and how maybe she should consider moving further out. It didn't quite add up. Last night, we were all having dinner, a quiet affair as usual. I casually asked Bella, "So have you started packing up your place yet? I mean, to get it ready for sale?" Bella's fork clattered against her plate. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly. "Packing," she repeated a little too brightly. "Oh no, not yet. Caden's still there, you know, it's all complicated." "Right," I said slowly, "complicated." Reese gave me a subtle nudge under the table, a silent warning to drop it, but the seed of suspicion had been planted in my mind. After dinner, while Reese was doing dishes with Bella, I retreated to my office, ostensibly to work, but really to do some quiet online digging. It started with a simple Google search. Bella's last name house for sale, nothing. Then I tried a property search website, plugging in Bella's address, and there it was. Sold on date months ago, before the divorce was even finalized, before she even mentioned needing a place to stay with us. My stomach dropped. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Bella hadn't just sold her house. She'd sold it before her divorce became a crisis, before she even hinted at needing our help. She'd sold her house, and then, it seemed, strategically positioned herself to move in with us, under the guise of needing a temporary refuge. I stared at the screen, the words "sold" and the date blurring before my eyes. It felt like a punch to the gut. We'd opened our home, our lives, to Bella, thinking we were helping a friend in genuine distress. But now, it seemed, we'd been played, and I had no idea how to tell Reese, or what to do next. I waited until Reese and Bella were settled in for the evening, watching some reality TV show in the living room before I finally pulled Reese aside. "Can we talk for a minute?" I asked, my voice low. Reese looked up, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Sure, what's up?" I led her into the kitchen, closing the door behind us. "Remember when I asked Bella about packing up her house?" I started, keeping my voice even. Reese nodded. "Yeah, why?" I took a deep breath. "Reese, I don't think Bella is planning on going back to her house." Reese frowned, confusion clouding her features. "What do you mean?" "Of course she is, eventually." I pulled out my phone, bringing up the property search website. "Look at this." I handed her the phone, pointing to the sold date. Reese's eyes scanned the screen, widening as she took in the information. "Sold," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Months ago." But she never said anything." "Exactly," I said, my voice hardening. "She never said anything because she didn't want us to know. Because she knew if we knew she'd already sold her house, we might not have offered her a place to stay." Reese stared at the phone, her face paling. "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "No, that can't be right. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Reese," I said gently, placing a hand on her arm. "It's public record. She sold her house months ago." The reality of it hit her then, the betrayal, the manipulation. Her shoulders slumped and she sank into a kitchen chair, her eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. "But why?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Why would she do that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe she's broke. Maybe she doesn't have anywhere else to go. Maybe she just thought we'd be easy marks." Reese's brow furrowed. "No," she said. "Bella isn't broke. She got a good settlement in the divorce, and her sister lives in town. She could have stayed with her." "Then why, Reese?" I asked, my voice laced with frustration. "Why would she lie to us like this? Why would she pretend she needed a temporary place when she clearly needed a permanent one?" Reese was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't understand." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of Bella's deception pressing down on us. Finally, Reese sighed, a long, weary sound. "We have to talk to her," she said, her voice firming slightly. "We have to know why." Reese decided she would be the one to talk to Bella. She wanted to give Bella a chance to explain, to come clean, to salvage something of their friendship. The next morning, after I'd left for work, Reese sat Bella down in the living room. I wasn't there, of course, but Reese recounted the conversation to me later, her voice still tinged with sadness and disappointment. "I just started by asking her about the house sale," Reese told me. "Casually, you know. Like, hey Bella, I was just thinking about your old house. Have you started dealing with all the paperwork from the sale yet?" Bella, according to Reese, had initially denied it vehemently. "Sold my house? Reese, what are you talking about? I haven't sold my house." But Reese was persistent, gently but firmly presenting the evidence, the website, the public records. Slowly, Bella's denial crumbled. She shifted in her seat, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding Reese's gaze. Then the excuses started. "Okay, yes, technically I sold it," Bella admitted, her voice low. "But it was complicated. I needed to sell it quickly to finalize the divorce settlement. It was all part of Caden's manipulations." "But Bella," Reese interrupted, her voice gentle but firm, "you sold it months ago, before you even told us you were getting divorced." Bella sighed dramatically, running a hand through her hair. I know, it's been so much, I haven't been thinking straight. I just needed a place to land, somewhere safe, somewhere I could grieve." "But you lied to us," Reese said, the hurt evident in her voice. "You let us believe you needed a temporary place. You let us think you were actively looking for your own apartment." Bella's eyes welled up with tears, a familiar tactic. "Oh, Reese, don't you understand? I was terrified. I was so lost and alone. I didn't know where else to go, and you guys are my best friends. I knew you wouldn't turn me away." "But you could have been honest with us," Reese said, her voice shaking slightly. "You could have told us the truth. We would have still helped you, Bella. We would have still offered you a place to stay." Bella sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "But would you have? Really? If I'd said, 'Hey, Reese, I've sold my house and I need a place to live indefinitely. Can I move in with you?' Would you have said yes?" Reese hesitated. I could imagine her wrestling with the question, the conflict between her loyalty to Bella and the dawning realization of Bella's manipulation. "I don't know," Reese admitted honestly. "Maybe not. But that's not the point, Bella. The point is, you didn't give us a choice. You manipulated us into this situation." Bella's tears turned to anger. "Manipulated? Is that really what you think? After everything I've been through, you think I'm manipulating you?" "Bella," Reese said, her voice weary, "you sold your house months ago and didn't tell us. You let us believe you needed a short-term solution when you needed a long-term one. You've been living here for weeks, and you haven't made any effort to find your own place. What else are we supposed to think? Bella's anger flared. Fine, she snapped, jumping up from the couch. Fine, if that's how you really feel, then maybe I should just leave. Maybe I'm not welcome here anymore. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am just manipulating you. Maybe I should just go and be alone and miserable, and then you'll both be happy. She stormed off to the spare bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Reese just sat there, stunned, the silence in the living room heavy and thick with unspoken words. Later that day, after a tense and awkward evening, Bella announced she would start looking for apartments first thing tomorrow. It was a hollow promise, and we both knew it. But Reese, bless her generous heart, didn't push it further. 2 days later, Bella did leave. Not to a new apartment, but to her sister's, apparently. It was a hurried, unceremonious departure, filled with strained goodbyes and a distinct lack of genuine warmth. As Bella's car pulled away from the curb, Reese turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. Well, she said, a small, shaky smile playing on her lips, that's that, I guess. Yeah, I said, wrapping my arms around her, that's that. The spare bedroom felt strangely empty, and the silence in our house was different now, lighter, less burdened. We'd navigated a complicated situation, set a boundary, and ultimately chosen our marriage and our own well-being over a friendship that had become, perhaps, a little too demanding, a little too manipulative. It wasn't a clean, neat resolution. There were still lingering threads of hurt and disappointment, especially for Reese. But it was a resolution nonetheless. And in the quiet of our home, together, we finally began to breathe a little easier.
My brother tried to ruin my daughter's wedding by comparing it to his, until I exposed the fact that I paid for his wedding too, and now the family is fighting. My daughter Emma's wedding day should have been perfect. Months of planning, stress, and frankly, a ridiculous amount of money had gone into making it the fairy tale she'd always dreamed of, and for the most part, it was. The venue was stunning, a vineyard bathed in late afternoon sun. Emma looked radiant in her dress, and her fiancé, David, was beaming at the altar. Even the weather cooperated, a perfect crisp autumn day. Everything was going smoothly, beautifully, until my brother, Arthur, decided to make it about himself. Arthur and I have always had a complicated relationship. Sibling rivalry is probably too simple a term for it. Let's just say there's always been a subtle undercurrent of competition, often fueled by Arthur, usually masked as good-natured ribbing. He got married a few years before Emma, to a lovely woman named Kara, and their wedding was nice, perfectly pleasant. A decent hall, a buffet dinner, standard DJ. It was within their budget and everyone had a good time. No complaints, but it was definitely not in the same league as Emma's. And that, I think, was the root of the problem. It started subtly during the speeches. My husband, Wyatt, gave a heartfelt toast, Emma's best friend Jasmine delivered a funny and touching speech, and then it was Arthur's turn. He started off well enough, some generic brotherly love stuff, but then he veered off course. He started talking about weddings in general, about how sometimes people get carried away, how they forget what's really important. He used phrases like keeping it real and not needing to break the bank to show your love. He even made a joke about some people needing to compensate for other things with a lavish wedding. It was thinly veiled, but everyone who knew Arthur knew exactly who he was talking about, us and Emma's wedding. I tried to ignore it, to brush it off as Arthur just being Arthur. Wyatt shot me a look, his jaw tight. Emma, bless her heart, just smiled weakly, clearly trying to keep her composure. But I could feel the atmosphere in the room shift. The joyful buzz dipped, replaced by an uncomfortable tension. After the speeches, during the dinner service, Arthur cornered me near the bar. He had a drink in hand, and that slightly glazed look in his eyes that meant he was about to say something honest, which usually translated to something hurtful and passive-aggressive. Genesis, he started, his voice a little too loud. It's all very impressive, isn't it? He gestured around the room, taking in the floral arrangements, the ice sculpture, the string quartet. Must have cost a fortune. I forced a smile. We wanted to make it special for Emma and David. Special, yes, necessary, debatable. He took a large gulp of his drink. Kara and I, we had a lovely wedding, didn't we? Meaningful, without all this fuss. He waved his hand dismissively again. Arthur, everyone's wedding is different, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Emma and David wanted this, and we were happy to give it to them. Of course, he said, but his tone dripped with sarcasm. Some people just have more resources, I suppose. He emphasized resources with a pointed look. That's when I started to get truly angry. It wasn't just the veiled insults, the snide comments. It was the implication that we were somehow flaunting our wealth, showing off, trying to make him feel inadequate. And it was all happening on Emma's wedding day, a day that should have been solely about her and David. Arthur, I said, my voice sharper now. What exactly is your point? He shrugged, feigning innocence. No point, just observing. It's just a lot, isn't it? For one day. He smirked, a small, unpleasant twist of his lips. Our wedding was just as valid even if it wasn't Instagram-worthy. That comment stung. It was so deliberately mean-spirited, so calculated to undermine Emma's joy and our effort, and it was completely untrue. Their wedding asterisk was asterisk valid, it asterisk was asterisk lovely in its own way. No one was saying otherwise. Except, apparently, Arthur himself by constantly comparing it unfavorably to Emma's. I walked away from him then, my blood boiling. I needed to get away, to calm down before I said something I regretted, but the damage was done. Arthur's comments had cast a shadow over the day, a subtle but undeniable chill in the air. I could see Emma was trying to ignore it, but I knew she'd heard, she'd felt it. And it made my heart ache for her. This was supposed to be her perfect day, and her own uncle was trying to chip away at it, all because… Because what? Because his wedding wasn't as expensive, because he felt insecure. It was petty, childish, and utterly selfish, and it was ruining my daughter's wedding. That night after the wedding, after Emma and David had left for their honeymoon, Wyatt and I sat in our quiet house, the remnants of the celebration still echoing in our minds. He really did it, didn't he? Wyatt said, his voice weary. He really did, I sighed. He couldn't just let Emma have her day. He had to make it about himself, about his insecurities. It's always something with Arthur, isn't it? Wyatt said, running a hand through his hair. Always has to be the center of attention, even if it means dragging everyone else down. We talked for a long time that night, dissecting Arthur's behavior, trying to understand his motivations. But honestly, there was no understanding it. It was just pure, unadulterated pettiness, disguised as brotherly concern or whatever twisted logic he used to justify it in his own head. And it had marred what should have been a flawless day for our daughter. I went to bed feeling a mix of anger and deep disappointment, and a growing sense that this couldn't just be brushed under the rug. Arthur needed to be held accountable for his actions, but how? I wasn't sure yet. But as I drifted off to sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. It wasn't just about Arthur ruining Emma's wedding. It was about him implying that we, as parents, were somehow wrong for giving our daughter the wedding of her dreams. And that, I realized, was something I couldn't let stand. Asterisk asterisk update 1 asterisk asterisk the days after the wedding were a blur of thank you notes, unpacking decorations, and trying to recapture the joy that Arthur had tried to steal. Emma and David were blissfully happy on their honeymoon, thankfully oblivious to the drama that had unfolded at the reception. But back home, the fallout was just beginning. My phone started buzzing constantly with messages and calls from family members. At first, they were just checking in about the wedding, asking if everything had gone well. But gradually, the tone shifted. Cousins, aunts, even my own mother started asking in carefully worded but pointed ways about Arthur's speech. Was Arthur all right? My Aunt Clara texted. He seemed a little down during his speech. Did Arthur say something at the wedding? My cousin Genesis messaged. I heard some people talking afterwards, but I couldn't quite hear. My mother called, her voice laced with concern. Genesis, darling, Arthur called me. He seemed very upset. He said he felt a little overshadowed at Emma's wedding. Overshadowed? My blood pressure spiked just hearing the word. Overshadowed at asterisk his niece's asterisk wedding. Was he serious? Or was he playing the victim now, trying to spin the narrative to make himself look like the wronged party? Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Arthur made some very inappropriate and frankly rude comments during his speech. He tried to make Emma's wedding about himself and his insecurities. Oh, darling, you must be misinterpreting him, my mother said, her tone instantly shifting to Arthur-apologist mode. Arthur's always been sensitive. He probably just felt a little left out. Weddings can be hard for some people, you know. Hard. Mom, it was Emma's wedding, not a therapy session for Arthur's bruised ego. I snapped, losing my patience. He made snide remarks about our wedding being too expensive, about us showing off. He completely undermined Emma's happiness. Now, Genesis, don't exaggerate, my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar, dismissive tone. Arthur wouldn't do that intentionally. He's just expressing himself. Maybe you're being a little oversensitive. Oversensitive. Was everyone in my family suddenly living in an alternate reality where Arthur's behavior was acceptable and my reaction was the problem? It was infuriating. It felt like everyone was bending over backwards to excuse Arthur's behavior, to minimize the hurt he had caused, to make asterisk me asterisk feel like I was the one overreacting. That's when I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to let Arthur get away with this. I wasn't going to let my family minimize his actions or make me feel like I was crazy for being upset. And most importantly, I wasn't going to let Emma's wedding day be remembered for anything other than the beautiful, joyful celebration it should have been. Wyatt, bless his pragmatic soul, suggested a course of action. "You know what you need to do, Genesis," he said, his eyes glinting with a mischievous spark. "You need to show them the receipts." I stared at him, confused. "Receipts? What receipts?" "The wedding receipts, Genesis," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "All of them, from Emma's wedding and from Arthur's wedding too." And then it clicked. Wyatt was right. I had the perfect weapon to silence Arthur and all his enablers. I had the proof, the cold, hard financial evidence, to expose his petty lies and set the record straight. And not just about Emma's wedding. About his wedding too. Because the truth, the delicious, ironic truth, was that Arthur's meaningful, not Instagram-worthy wedding hadn't been entirely funded by him and Kara. Not even close. Wyatt and I, in our well-meaning but perhaps misguided desire to help Arthur and Kara start their married life without financial stress, had offered to contribute to their wedding. Generously. We'd covered a significant portion of their expenses, a fact that Arthur had conveniently forgotten, or at least chosen to ignore. I spent the next hour digging through old files, emails, and bank statements. It was all there, meticulously documented. The checks we'd written, the vendor invoices we'd paid directly, the detailed breakdown of our contributions to Arthur and Kara's wedding. And then, of course, there were the receipts for Emma's wedding, a mountain of paper and digital confirmations detailing every single expense, from the venue rental to the floral arrangements to the ice sculpture that Arthur had so sneered at. As I gathered the documents, a plan began to form in my mind. It wasn't just about correcting Arthur's lies. It was about reclaiming Emma's wedding day, about silencing the negativity, about showing everyone, once and for all, the truth. And about finally, definitively, shutting down Arthur's petty, envious attempts to undermine our family's happiness. It was time to show everyone the receipts, and let the chips fall where they may. Update 2 the family group chat had been blowing up all morning. More messages, more calls, all variations on the same theme. "Arthur is upset, are you and Arthur fighting? Can't you just let it go?" I'd been ignoring them, letting the tension build. It was time for my grand reveal. I typed out a message, carefully choosing my words. "Family, I'm seeing a lot of concern about Arthur and Emma's wedding. I understand there's some misinformation circulating. So, to clear things up, I'm going to share some information that I think is relevant." Then, I attached a series of screenshots. First, a detailed spreadsheet outlining every expense for Emma and David's wedding, totaling a substantial but justifiable amount. Then, a second spreadsheet, identical in format, detailing every expense for Arthur and Kara's wedding, including the significant portion that Wyatt and I had contributed. And finally, a simple, stark summary. Total cost of Emma's wedding total. Total cost of Arthur's wedding total. Our contribution to Arthur's wedding, just for clarity. And then, I hit send. The silence in the group chat was deafening. For a full minute, nothing. Then, the floodgates opened. My cousin Jasmine was the first to break the silence. "Genesis, what is this?" My Aunt Clara followed quickly. "I don't understand, did you pay for Arthur's wedding too?" My mother called me directly, her voice trembling. "Genesis, explain this to me right now. What is the meaning of this financial statement?" I answered her call, my voice calm and steady. "Mom, it's exactly what it looks like. Arthur has been implying that Emma's wedding was some extravagant, unnecessary display of wealth, designed to make him feel inadequate. He's been suggesting that his wedding was somehow more meaningful because it was less expensive. And he's been doing it all while conveniently forgetting a rather crucial detail." "And what is that detail?" my mother asked, her voice tight. "That Wyatt and I paid for a significant portion of his wedding, Mom," I said, emphasizing each word. "We paid for the venue, the catering, the DJ, even Kara's dress. We wanted to help them out, to give them a good start, and we did it willingly, happily. But now, Arthur is using his wedding, a wedding we helped fund, to criticize Emma's wedding, a wedding we also funded. The hypocrisy is breathtaking, isn't it?" The silence on the other end of the line was even more telling than the silence in the group chat. I could practically hear my mother's brain short-circuiting, trying to reconcile her image of her sensitive son with the cold, hard financial reality I had just presented. "But why, Genesis?" my mother finally stammered. "Why are you doing this? Why are you airing all this dirty laundry?" Dirty laundry, Mom, I repeated, incredulous. Arthur is the one who started airing dirty laundry at Emma's wedding in front of everyone. He's the one who tried to make us feel ashamed for celebrating our daughter's happiness. I'm just setting the record straight. I'm just showing everyone the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, was devastatingly effective. The group chat erupted again, this time with a very different tone. Suddenly, the questions weren't about my oversensitivity or Arthur's feelings. They were about Arthur's dishonesty, his pettiness, his sheer audacity. My cousin Genesis wrote, "Arthur, is this true? Did Genesis and Wyatt pay for your wedding?" My Aunt Clara added, "Arthur, I'm really disappointed. I thought you were better than this." Even my mother, after her initial shock, sent a message to the group chat. "Arthur, I need to speak to you. This is unacceptable." Arthur, predictably, went radio silent. He didn't respond to the group chat, didn't answer his phone, didn't even text back. He had been exposed, his petty lies laid bare for everyone to see, and the fallout was swift and brutal. Later that day, Emma called, her voice filled with a mix of anger and relief. "Mom, I saw the messages. I can't believe he did that. And I can't believe you guys paid for his wedding too. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "We didn't want to make a big deal of it, sweetie," I explained. "We just wanted to help Arthur and Kara out, and honestly, we never expected him to behave like this." "Well, thank you, Mom and Dad," Emma said, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for giving me the wedding of my dreams, and thank you for setting the record straight. He's such a jerk." And she was right. Arthur was a jerk. But more than that, he was exposed. His pettiness, his envy, his attempts to undermine our family's happiness, they were all out in the open, for everyone to see. Emma's wedding day, finally, could be remembered for what it truly was, a beautiful celebration of love and joy, untainted by Arthur's bitter negativity. And as for Arthur, well, he had a lot of explaining to do, and for the first time I felt a sense of peace. The truth was out, and sometimes that's all you need for a satisfying resolution, even if it's a little messy and a little uncomfortable. Justice, in its own way, had been served. My dad chose me to be CEO of the family company over my stepbrother. Now he thinks he's not good enough because he isn't blood-related. What should I do? My stepbrother Philip has always acted like the family business was his birthright. Ever since Dad remarried Philip's mom, it's been this constant undercurrent in our family. "When I take over the business," he'd say, or, "When it's my turn to run things." He's only 2 years older than me. I'm 28 and he's 30, but he's always carried himself like he was already the CEO in waiting. Dad, August, never really corrected him, which I think fueled it. Dad owns a successful construction company, August and Sons Construction, even though it's just him and me now, and used to be him and his dad before that. It's been in our family for generations. Growing up, Philip worked summers at the company, mostly doing grunt work, which he would always complain about, saying it was beneath him and that he was management material. I worked summers too, same grunt work, and never complained because, well, it was a job and it was family. I actually enjoyed it more than Philip ever did. I learned the names of all the tools, got to know some of the guys in the field, and honestly, I kind of liked being outside and seeing how things were built. Philip always seemed to see it as just a stepping stone, something to endure until he got to the important part, which in his mind was sitting in Dad's office and making the big decisions. After college, Philip came to work for the company full-time, right into a project management role. I took a different path. I went to business school, got my MBA, and worked in corporate finance for a few years. I always knew I'd come back to the family business eventually, but I wanted to get some outside experience first, learn different perspectives, and frankly, just figure out if construction was really what I wanted, not just what was expected. About a year ago, Dad started talking about succession planning. He's not getting younger, and while he's still sharp as a tack and working hard, he wanted to start thinking about the future of the company. Philip, of course, was practically vibrating with excitement, assuming it was just a formality before Dad officially handed him the keys to the kingdom. I went along with it, figuring it was Dad's company to do with as he pleased, and if he wanted Philip to take over, that was his decision. Honestly, I was a little ambivalent at that point. I was doing well in finance, making good money, but the family business was always in the back of my mind. Then last week, Dad called a family meeting. Me, Philip, and both our moms were there. He sat us down in the living room, looking serious, and said he wanted to finally lay out his succession plan. He had a lawyer draw up all the official documents, and he wanted to go over it with us. Philip was practically beaming, leaning forward in his chair, ready to hear the coronation speech. Dad cleared his throat and started talking. He explained that he had given a lot of thought to the future of August and Sons, And after considering everyone's skills and experience, he had decided on a different path than perhaps Philip was expecting. He paused, and Philip's smile faltered slightly. Dad continued, I've decided that Zoe will be taking over as CEO when I retire. You could have heard a pin drop. Philip's face went white. His mom looked stunned. My mom, well, she just squeezed my hand, a small smile playing on her lips. Dad went on to explain that he valued my business acumen, my outside experience, and my understanding of the financial side of the company. He said that while Philip had been working in operations, my skills were better suited for leading the company into the future. He emphasized that this wasn't a reflection of Philip's abilities, but rather a strategic decision based on our individual strengths. He said Philip would still be a vital part of the company, possibly in a COO role overseeing projects, but the top spot was mine. Philip didn't say a word. He just stared at Dad, his mouth slightly open, like he couldn't process what he was hearing. The meeting ended shortly after that, with Dad handing us copies of the succession plan documents to review. Philip grabbed his copy and practically stormed out of the house without a word to anyone. It's been a week since then, and the silence from Philip has been deafening. He's been at work, but Dad said he's been distant and withdrawn, barely speaking to anyone. I haven't reached out to him yet. I honestly don't know what to say. Part of me feels guilty, even though I didn't ask for this. Another part of me is, well, maybe a little excited. I know I'm capable of running the company. I have the skills, the education, and honestly, I think I have the passion for it too, even if I didn't always realize it. But the way Philip is reacting makes me feel like I've stolen something from him, even though it was Dad's decision, not mine. Reddit, am I the jerk for accepting this? Should I have refused and told Dad to give it to Philip instead, just to keep the peace? I honestly don't know what the right thing to do is, but I have a feeling this is going to get messy. Update 1: things have definitely gotten messier. Philip finally broke his silence, and it was explosive, to say the least. He didn't talk to me directly at first. Instead, he went straight to Dad. Apparently, he cornered Dad in his office yesterday afternoon and demanded an explanation. Dad told me about it later, looking tired and frustrated. According to Dad, Philip accused him of being unfair, of playing favorites, of undermining him his entire life. He said Dad had always led him to believe the business would be his, and now, at the last minute, he was changing the rules. Dad tried to explain his reasoning again, emphasizing my qualifications and the strategic nature of his decision, but Philip wasn't having it. He kept interrupting, yelling, and even started bringing up old grievances, things that happened years ago, like when Dad bought me a car for graduation and Philip only got cash. It was a completely different situation. My car was older and unreliable. Philip's was practically brand new, but in Philip's mind, it was just another example of Dad favoring me. Dad said he tried to stay calm, but Philip just kept escalating. Then, Philip dropped a bombshell. He said, "You know why you're doing this, don't you? It's because I'm not really your son." Dad was stunned. He told me he just stared at Philip, not knowing what to say. Philip continued, "You've always favored Zoe because she's your blood. I'm just the stepkid, the afterthought. You never really saw me as part of the family, did you?" Dad was furious at that point. He told Philip, "Don't you ever say that to me again. I've raised you since you were 10 years old. I've treated you exactly the same as Zoe. This decision has nothing to do with who your mother is or isn't. It's about what's best for the company." But Philip wasn't listening. He was too caught up in his own narrative of being the slighted stepchild, the one who never truly belonged. He stormed out of Dad's office, slamming the door behind him. Dad is heartbroken. He said he never expected Philip to react this way. He genuinely thought Philip would understand the business rationale behind his decision, even if he was initially disappointed. He's always tried to be fair to both of us, and to have Philip throw this stepchild accusation in his face really stung. Later that evening, Philip's mom, Beatrice, called me. I was hesitant to answer, but I figured I should hear what she had to say. Her tone was surprisingly calm, almost reasonable. She started by saying she understood Dad's decision, at least from a business perspective. She acknowledged that my MBA and corporate experience were valuable assets for running a company like August and Sons. I was honestly shocked. I expected her to be furious, to defend Philip, to accuse Dad and me of betraying him. But instead, she said, "Zoe, I know this isn't your fault. You didn't ask for this. But you need to understand how Philip is feeling." She went on to explain that Philip has always been insecure, always felt like he had to prove himself, especially to Dad. She said he's built his entire identity around taking over the family business. It's not just about the job for him, it's about validation, about finally feeling like he's good enough, like he's worthy of Dad's approval. She said, "He's not angry at you, Zoe. He's angry at himself, and he's projecting it onto your father. And maybe a little bit onto you." She asked me to talk to Philip, to try to understand his perspective, to reassure him that he's still valued, still important to the family and the company. She said maybe if he heard it from me, from his stepsister, it would carry more weight than hearing it from Dad. I told her I would think about it. I'm still processing everything. On one hand, I understand what Beatrice is saying. I can see how Philip might feel insecure, how he might have built up this expectation in his head. But on the other hand, his reaction has been so extreme, so hurtful to Dad, and honestly, to me too, even though he hasn't directly said anything to me yet. And the stepchild accusation, that just feels like a cheap shot, a way to deflect responsibility for his own shortcomings and make Dad feel guilty. I'm torn. Should I reach out to Philip? Should I try to talk to him even after the way he's acted? Or should I just let him cool down and hope he eventually comes around on his own? My gut is telling me to try to bridge the gap, but my head is screaming that he's being unreasonable and doesn't deserve my sympathy. What do I do, Reddit? Update 2, I decided to take Beatrice's advice, hesitantly. I texted Philip and asked if we could talk. To my surprise, he actually agreed. He suggested meeting for coffee after work. I met him at a cafe near our office. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window, looking even more withdrawn than Dad described. He barely made eye contact when I sat down. The silence was heavy, so I started. "Philip, I wanted to talk about everything." He just nodded, still not looking at me. "I know you're upset about Dad's decision," I continued. "And honestly, I can understand why. It's a big change and it probably wasn't what you were expecting." He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and angry. "Understanding. Do you really understand, Zoe? Have you ever had anything taken away from you that you thought was yours? That you were promised was yours?" "No," I admitted. "But I can imagine it must be incredibly disappointing." "Disappointing," he scoffed. "It's more than disappointing, it's humiliating. It's like Dad is saying I'm not good enough, that all these years I've been working at the company, busting my ass, it was all for nothing." "That's not what Dad is saying," I argued gently. "He values your work, Philip. He said you're great at operations. He just thinks my skills are better suited for the CEO role." "Oh, your skills," he sneered. "Your fancy MBA, is that what makes you better than me? Because you went to some fancy school and learned how to crunch numbers. I know this company inside and out. I know the guys in the field. I know how projects get done. You sit in an office and look at spreadsheets." "Philip, that's not fair," I said, my voice starting to rise. "I worked summers just like you did. I know the basics of construction. And yes, my MBA and finance experience are relevant to running a business, especially in today's market." "Relevant," he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you think this is about? Relevance? It's about family, Zoe. It's about legacy. It's about my future." "And what about my future, Philip?" I challenged. "Don't I deserve a future in the family business too? Just because you're older doesn't automatically mean you're entitled to be CEO." He glared at me. "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You think you're so entitled, don't you? Mr. Daddy's girl getting everything handed to you on a silver platter." "That's ridiculous," I retorted, my anger finally boiling over. "I've worked hard for everything I've achieved, and Dad's decision wasn't about handing me anything. It was about what's best for the company, something you clearly don't understand because you're too busy feeling sorry for yourself." He slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "Don't you talk to me like that. You have no idea what I'm going through." "Oh, I have no idea," I shot back, standing up. "You think you're the only one hurting here. You think Dad isn't hurting. You think I'm not feeling awkward and guilty because of your childish tantrum." "Tantrum," he yelled, standing up too, his face inches from mine. "This isn't a tantrum, Zoe. This is my life." "Well, guess what, Philip?" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Life isn't always fair. Sometimes you don't get what you want. And sometimes, just sometimes, you have to grow up and deal with it." I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving him standing there, speechless. I was furious, hurt, and honestly, a little scared. His anger was so intense, so personal. It was clear this wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about something much deeper, something rooted in years of resentment and insecurity. I called Beatrice after I got home, my voice still trembling. I told her about the conversation, about Philip's accusations, about his anger. She listened quietly, then sighed. "I'm sorry, Zoe," she said. "I hoped you could reach him, but I guess it's worse than I thought." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart sinking. "He's been talking about leaving the company," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. He said if he can't be CEO, there's no point in staying. He said he's going to find a company that actually appreciates him. My stomach dropped. Philip leaving August and Sons? It was almost unthinkable. He's been there for years. He knows the business inside and out, operations especially. Losing him would be a huge blow, not just to the company but to Dad, to the whole family. And yet, after the way he's acted, after the things he's said, I'm not sure I even want him to stay. But the thought of him leaving, of further fracturing our family, of potentially damaging the company, it's terrifying. What have we done? And what do we do now? Resolution: Philip did leave. He handed in his resignation the day after our disastrous coffee meeting. Dad tried to talk him out of it, of course, but Philip was adamant. He said he needed a fresh start, a place where he could be valued for his own merits, not just be seen as Zoe's stepbrother. It was a huge blow to August and Sons. Philip was a key project manager, and losing him left a significant gap in operations. Dad was devastated, not just professionally, but personally. He felt like he had failed Philip, like he had somehow driven him away. Beatrice was heartbroken too, but she seemed less surprised by Philip's decision. She said she had seen this coming, that Philip had been increasingly unhappy for months, and that maybe this was for the best, a chance for him to find his own path, even if it was painful in the short term. I felt complicated. Part of me was relieved that Philip was gone. His anger, his resentment, it was toxic and draining to be around. But another part of me felt guilty, like I had somehow contributed to this, even though I knew logically it wasn't my fault. And I was worried about the company. Replacing Philip wasn't going to be easy. But life and business goes on. Dad, despite his sadness, threw himself into finding a replacement and restructuring operations. I stepped up too, taking on more responsibility, learning the ropes of the CEO role, and trying to fill in some of the gaps left by Philip's departure. It was chaotic, stressful, and exhausting, but slowly, things started to stabilize. And then, about 3 months after Philip left, something unexpected happened. He called me. I was at work, buried in paperwork, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was just another vendor or client. But then I saw the name on the caller ID, Philip. My heart skipped a beat. I answered hesitantly. "Hello? Zoe, it's me," he said, his voice sounding different, softer, less angry. "Philip, hi," I replied, unsure what to expect. Can we talk?" he asked. "I mean, really talk. Not yell at each other in a coffee shop?" I paused. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Yeah, we can talk." We met for lunch a few days later, this time at a park, sitting on a bench overlooking a lake. It was a beautiful day, sunny and warm, a stark contrast to the coldness between us for so long. Philip looked different too. He seemed calmer, less tense. He started by apologizing. A genuine apology, not the half-hearted ones he had offered before. "Zoe, I'm sorry," he said, looking me in the eye for the first time in months. "I was a jerk. I acted like a spoiled brat. I said some really awful things, especially to Dad." I nodded, accepting his apology. "It's okay, Philip," I said. "It's in the past." "No, it's not okay," he insisted. "I need to say it, I was wrong." I was so focused on myself, on what I thought I deserved, that I didn't even stop to consider how my actions were affecting everyone else. He went on to explain that leaving August and Sons had been a wake-up call for him. He had taken a job at a smaller construction company, a startup, and it was humbling. He was back to doing grunt work, essentially starting over from scratch. But he said it was also freeing. "I realized," he continued, "that I was so obsessed with being CEO, with taking over Dad's company, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. That's what everyone expected of me. But it wasn't really what I wanted. Not deep down." He paused, looking out at the lake. "I'm still figuring out what I do want," he admitted. "But I know it's not just about titles and positions. It's about building things, literally, being part of a team, creating something tangible." He looked back at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "Maybe you were always better suited to be CEO," he said, surprisingly without bitterness. "Maybe Dad was right all along." I smiled back, a genuine smile this time. "Maybe," I said. We talked for a long time that day, about work, about life, about everything and nothing. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. Philip didn't come back to August and Sons. He's still at the startup and seems to be genuinely enjoying it. He and Dad are slowly rebuilding their relationship, taking it one step at a time. And Philip and I, we're talking again. We're not best friends, not yet, but we're communicating, we're being civil. And maybe, just maybe, we can eventually build a real step-sibling relationship, one that's not based on competition and resentment, but on mutual respect and understanding. The succession plan remains in place. I'm the CEO of August and Sons, and I'm doing my best to lead the company into the future. It's challenging, demanding, and sometimes overwhelming, but I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm finding my own path just like Philip is. It wasn't a neat and tidy resolution. There were no villains, no clear right or wrong answers, just complex family dynamics, difficult choices, and real consequences. But in the end, maybe that's what makes it feel real. And maybe, just maybe, we're all going to be okay.